All right, thank you. Good evening. Welcome to the meeting of the Dog Park Committee. We'll call the meeting to order. It is exactly 6 p.m. on January 18th. And nice to see everybody. Welcome.
It's nice to be here.
So I handed out agendas. I know they've been posted, but brought copies of them. And also just in front of you, and if you don't have them, let me know, just copies of the minutes, the draft minutes, which you'll see on your agenda if you had a chance to read them earlier when I sent them out. If not, take a few minutes now and read them, and then you can vote on them. And also, because we had one email address change that I had anyway, I had initially sent all of you a contact listing that I thought might be useful. So I'm going to split them up this way. And this is, these are your fellow committee members. Just a hard copy of it with your addresses, your precinct, your email, and your telephone number, should you need it for any reason. And
Thanks, sir.
I think we can get started. We have 6 of our 7 members. Mr. Bregman was unable to attend, but graciously said to go forward with the meeting, and we can keep him up to date on it after. So, Amy Contois, our animal control officer tonight here, just until you elect chair and vice chair, which you'll do shortly. We were just getting the meeting started. We'll stay this evening, be here for a resource for you. And then, as we mentioned, at any time during this process, just give us a heads up, because we do have, sometimes another commitment at the same night, or someone else may, but if you need either one of us, or our town engineer, DPW director, any resources we can bring to you, just let us know, and we'll make sure we get here for you.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome. Our pleasure. Yeah, we want to make this as easy as we can for you and give you whatever we can. So why don't we just turn to the first item on the agenda, which is a vote for the chair, the vice chair, and the secretary of the committee. So just to be formal about it, do we have, I would just open it up for nominations for chair. Does anyone want to nominate someone or self-nominate for chair? Anyone interested?
Nominate Ron Party for chair.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Second. Open for discussion. Do we have another nomination for chair, or we have one nomination? Okay, then why don't we take a vote for the chair. All in favor?
Aye.
I'm not voting because I'm not a committee member. It's not that I'm opposed. Okay, then I'm going to open up the congratulations. We have a chair. Open it up for a vice chair. Are there nominations for a vice chair?
I'll nominate myself.
Okay, second. Second. Anyone else? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And secretary. Are there nominations for secretary?
I would nominate Elise.
Elise, okay. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Wonderful. Thank you. And Elise, I'm more than happy to work with you on the minutes. I did, through here. Yeah, I try to keep them simple for you. I mean, I won't be at all your meetings, so I won't be able to do them. But if you have any questions, don't ever hesitate.
Thank you.
We're happy to help. You've been involved in committees, so you know how to do this. But I was hoping by doing the first one, and I'll do this one too.
And under
I
the
can take
leadership of Ron, I'll be happy.
Nah.
Yeah, and
You'll prop him up when he needs
Or
it.
perhaps I should say Mr. Prouty.
No, you should not. And you shouldn't tell Ollie.
and to all 3 of you, whatever you
mine.
need
I
for posting meetings. If you need our help, either Amy or I can help you and make sure we circulate materials. We can make copies for you ahead of time and make sure they're available for you when you get here. So, all right, thanks. So, Mr. Chairman, I turn to you then
Okay.
to take over the
Thank
agenda.
you. We have the draft minutes from January 4th. Has everyone had a chance to read them?
Yes.
Yes.
Are there any errors or omissions?
Yeah. On the back of the page, the last paragraph says Ms. Vecchio and Ms. Liddy each offered to reach out to other communities. That wasn't me.
Wasn't it?
I'm sorry.
I think it was you, wasn't it?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
I will correct those and make sure that they're corrected when they're submitted. If you want to take a vote to correct them as revised, I'll make sure a revised version gets to the clerk.
All right, could we have a motion to approve them as corrected? All those in favor?
Aye.
They are approved.
So now you see, it's hard when you're speaking and trying to take notes too, so I apologize for that.
Good, good.
At one point, I wasn't even taking notes, we actually went back and used the meeting notes to finish this. So, thank you.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is reports from committee members that contacted other communities that have dog parks.
Didn't get a chance to do that. Nicole did.
Nicole did, I know.
So I have a document here that I brought. I can also make it available online for anybody who wants to have access to it for the public. It's basically just a rundown. I did email quite a few dog park, either the Fur Friends groups or contacted the town clerks for a lot of these dog parks. These are the ones that got back to me. Or I have friends that use some of these parks, so I use their knowledge as well. I looked into their size, ground covering, amenities, number of members, if they didn't have it, their town population, tried to get as many number of licensed dogs in town as I could, fees if applicable, who maintains the park, any issues they're dealing with, a lot of the things that we discussed at our last meeting. I wasn't exactly able to get everything that I was hoping for, but I believe I got enough information to give us a really good idea of what our dog park would be like, depending on the size and different things that we do. So that people can look through if you haven't already, and then I have just some comments that I wrote down that I shared with you that I could read through if you'd like. So the location, several parks were in proximity to athletic fields, recreational areas, but there are also successful parks in rural areas and even urban areas such as Boston. So the park recreational field areas, residents who live in areas such as recreational field areas are already experiencing traffic due to games and events and activities that take place on those fields. The bonus is that adding a dog park, even looking at their peak hours, is not going to significantly increase the traffic that they already experience in those areas. In residential areas, however, I believe there'd be a little bit of traffic increase, but still, as I look at some of the towns or parks that would be similar to what we hope our park to be, on the most beautiful days, on weekends, you're looking at maybe 10 to 15 dogs, max 20. And again, the odds of that all happening at the same time are very small, so we're not looking at a significant increase in traffic for those residents who may have that as a concern. Something that came up that I thought was interesting that the Rough group of the North End Dog Park does is they meet often with the abutters of their property. So if there were any residents that end up being abutters to our property, something we may consider asking our Friends of group to help out with is help addressing any ongoing concerns, not just concerns that arise before the building of a park, but also continuing concerns, anyone who's using it inappropriately or any noise complaints or anything, working together with the Friends of group, that would be really helpful. That's something we may ask them to do. Because obviously we want this to be a positive experience for everyone, especially those neighbors who are going to be directly impacted by the park. For size, most dog parks were at least 1 acre in size with 2 separate areas for larger dogs and smaller dogs. Having double access, this is something that Millbury has, I thought was a huge bonus. So they have the small area for the dogs and the large area. When you walk in, there's 2 gates to go into either one, but there's also a gate connecting the 2. So if you had a small dog and you were in the larger area and a large dog or a dog, if you know your dog's not very social, you can quickly escape into the smaller area, and I thought that was a really great idea. Wanted to at least bring that up. For ground cover, there was a lot of negative around natural grass cover. I do know that Millbury has that, and it seemed to be in good shape. I just actually went there on Monday. But from what I'm hearing from almost every single other park is that it either doesn't last, or it gets muddy, or it's just not a great cover. So if possible, to look into doing some sort of synthetic or mulch or alternative covering than grass. But at the same time, can be very expensive, so it doesn't need to exactly be a top priority. And some groups have begun fundraising after the creation of the park if it didn't fit into the budget.
And it might be more expensive firsthand, but then we'd also need to look at the cost of how much it would be to resod it every
Right.
year, every couple of years.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. For number of dogs, I already talked about this just a little bit. I mean, of course, it's difficult to say because each town is different, but I really looked at the Millbury, Sutton, the combined population of the two towns is 21,000, and the number of dogs licensed combined is 2,600, so that's even larger than Auburn. And they have 10 to 15 dogs there on the busiest, best of times, so I thought that was a good comparison, even more than Auburn would experience. Additionally, the Mashpee Dog Park was even more similar to Auburn. They have just a little less. I think Auburn's like 16,000. Is that accurate for population? Do we know?
It's a little over 16,000.
Okay, so they have 14,000 with just over 2,000 licensed dogs, which is very similar. And on the busiest days in the summer in Mashpee, they see 10 to 15 dogs at a time, from what they said, people who use that park.
It's very similar.
Yes, but much busier on the Cape, I would
Right.
think, than in Auburn on the summer. But still, what we can hopefully anticipate for our park. On the back, the other thing that came up that I wanted to acknowledge is the importance of the Fur Friends group. The towns that do not have one desperately want one, and it's been a great struggle without one. Those that have them have worked hard to ensure that the parks are maintained and being used appropriately. The knowledge that we have a group in town that's willing not only to help maintain our park, but also fund the remaining 10% is a huge advantage. We truly appreciate their efforts in making that happen for our pets in the town. Potentially inviting a member of the group to join us at our meetings. I know this is something that we talked about in our last meeting. Might be a good idea to talk about some of the things I've seen with other towns, such as websites, or like I said before, inviting abutters to be a part of the discussion with those groups moving forward is something that maybe we can do in a future meeting. And the big thing, of course, the issues and concerns. No park is without issue. I mean, it's gonna, you can't control everything that happens, but some things that parks do to alleviate those concerns is, well, first of all, if you have a fee or a permit that you need to use it, anyone without that permit is trespassing. And you can call the police and say that they're trespassing, and that's something that Millbury residents have told me they can do. They've never had to, but it is an option. If you have a public park, it's obviously not as easy to do that. But the most important thing is that each individual, like we've mentioned before, is 100% responsible for their dogs. It's no different that if they're walking on the sidewalk and the leash breaks and something happens, they're responsible, they're liable for their pet's behavior. The other thing is knowing that Worcester is looking into this happening, Oxford, Mendon, Uxbridge, etc. Grafton already has one, Millbury and Sutton already have one. That doesn't leave many of our neighbors without a dog park, which would hopefully decrease outside, non-residents from using our park, because I know that was a concern brought up by residents about our park. I think that's pretty much it. Those were my big notes that I came away from. Sorry, it was long-winded. It's a lot of information, but
Thank you for doing these interviews. This is
Hi.
very comprehensive.
yeah,
and-
people were great to respond. Surprisingly, they were really good to work with.
So I guess I'd like to pose a question to the group, based on the data that you've provided, and thank you for taking the time to do that. I want to make sure that we're all aligned in terms of what we do with this data, right? And kind of what I see it is serving as an input into pieces of it, not every single piece, but pieces of it will filter into the cost analysis. Pieces of it will fill into how we refine our dog site park criteria, for site selection. And I think it's also probably helpful for us to kind of take some of that data and kind of maybe create something, I'll call it dog park facts, for lack of a catchy term. Someone comes with something better and more sexier, by all means, throw it out there. But I see it that being an important piece to kind of help communicate and educate the community and the Board of Selectmen. So if we have data points that we can kind of, when we hear, what dog parks, create this amount of noise, or, there's 75 dogs, well, no, wait a second. Let me show you some facts that kind of help with the education process so that people don't make decisions based on bad information. So I just want to see if we have agreement. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in there. I see that as an input into a lot of these 3 or 4 different areas that we can leverage, but there's a lot of other things that we need to kind of add as far as inputs into an overall process. So is everyone fair with that? Reasonable?
I think from what I've heard from members of the community as well as the Board of Selectmen, you hit a great point. I think some type of fact sheet is really critical. Your information here is addressing some of the concerns that have been raised, but if you get it into a handout type of thing, something that you post, something that you can present, that goes a long way in addressing the questions before they get asked to. I think that's a great idea.
Right. Okay.
Very good. Thank you, Nicole. A lot of work went into that. When you were doing it and you have the sizes of the parks, is the size the fenced-in area, or does it include the parking for the park?
Most of them were just the fenced in, because when I sent out the email, I specified that I wanted to know their fenced in area. If not, I believe I would have made a note that said specifically how much was fenced in, but I'm pretty sure that was strictly fenced in area. The only one I was not exactly sure of, and I'm still waiting to get a response, is from the North End one, that they were 7,500 square feet. I wasn't sure if that was their pilot park or their permanent park, because they did a pilot park before they finalized their permanent park. So that was the only thing I wasn't positive about, but everything else I'm pretty confident was just the fenced in area.
And if you went down to the size they give you there, 7,500 square feet,
Right.
that's much smaller than
Yes.
the average. And if you were going to concede that as an ideal size, you certainly would change the list of sites that we're
Right.
considering. The sites that we're considering are so different that it will be very, very difficult for us to come up with one set of characteristics that we want to see in the park. It
That
is-
that small one that's in Boston. That's
Yeah,
why it's
That's
so
in
small.
the North End, yeah. Yep.
I've been there and I've actually
Oh, yeah.
seen the site.
Yeah.
It's very tiny.
Yeah.
I mean, it is essentially, if you can imagine that part of the city.
Right.
I mean, it's a very urban area and it's located adjacent to a park and an athletic field.
Yes.
And it's really kind of slid in. So they use some shrubbery and those are the barriers, but it's a very tiny space. I mean,
And that would be the pilot park,
very tiny.
because the permanent park isn't built
Expansion,
yet.
yes.
They said that should be open spring of 2017. So the pilot park, that's why I'm wondering if that is just the number for the pilot, so I should find out what the permanent park size is going to be, but that's what I thought, especially for the price, when they said the fencing and everything was less than whatever amount they said, and I was like, oh, that's...
Well, the other thing is that park, if my memory serves me, it's concrete.
Yes, that's what she
There's
said.
no
Yep.
grass,
Yep.
which I think for many of, I'll speak for my dog, would raise an issue.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Although it says that the new park will have canine grass.
Right. Which is
Very
Yep,
expensive.
very expensive. Yep.
Mr. Attorney, and I'll just pass this out too, you did a great job with this. If anyone wants to look into any others, I just printed this off the Stanton Foundation website.
Oh, great.
It's just a list of current participants in the state.
Perfect.
Thank you.
So just, looks like you hit the major
Some
ones
of them, yeah.
already. You did a great job. I just figured I'd bring that, if anyone wanted to do any additional help.
Listen, I spent
My understanding is the Yarmouth one is,
That one I didn't find out about.
yeah, it's a combination of, I think there are other things near there, other fields in addition. So it's more of a recreation area.
Yeah.
So that one's a little bit different than just being a standalone park.
Right.
I'm sure they each have their own
Yeah,
unique features.
yeah.
The other thing for ground cover is that it depends on what you've got for top cover.
Right.
If you chose Camp Gleason, for example, which is pine wooded, you've got pine needles there, you'd never grow grass underneath them. Whereas most of the others have pretty good turf at present. Now, depending on how many dogs you had and how many square feet you had, I know that the grass might go. They warn you somewhere, I think it was in the Stanton website, that other good covers, such as mulch, are apt to be expensive because erosion takes it away. And that depends, again, on your site, whether it's sloped or flat, obviously. The sites left on a sheet that were considered and were considered as part of those final sites are all very flat except for Camp Gleason, which is quite sloped in areas.
Yeah, and then when we looked at Camp Gleason, we actually at one point were looking at the back, if you were to drive down the driveway, the back right section of the parking lot, thinking that we would have to actually dig up that parking lot.
Yeah.
Because like you said,
You're right.
that was a tough site to look at.
While the whole site is big, much of it is so narrow and so
Right.
steep that it's not usable.
Yeah.
I would suggest that all of you get out and look at least look at the 5 sites that are left there, because I'm sure that it would color your choices as we get closer to making a choice.
But I would suggest that before, if you want to spend the time to go out and look at sites, that's great. What I would suggest is we all should be baselined on what we're looking for in terms of
Yes, that's-
criteria. But we'll go out there 6 or 7 times and come back with not enough to make a decision on. So
Right.
with that said, I would say that one of the things that we go through tonight is, which is on the agenda thankfully, is to kind of look at this criteria that we have to kind of agree upon that will be used in the assessment and validation of the different sites that we look at.
Just to add to something, Ron, that you were saying about the surfaces. So, like you had mentioned, Nicole, about the grass holding up pretty well at Millbury. I think their park is just over 2 acres.
Oh, is it 2 acres? Okay.
And if they have, at most 20 dogs at a time, that's a very large area. So you're not having dogs run over the same area constantly, kicking up the dirt, making mud when it rains. Because it is a concern, because then you're looking at cost for reseeding, watering the grass, cutting the grass, all of that. But the Stanton Foundation does go over different surfaces. There's pros and cons to everything. Grass is high maintenance, but it might be a cheaper option compared to some of the others. Mulch is pretty, but it can also, it absorbs urine. It can be a hosting ground for fleas and different insects. There's stone dust listed on their website, which has gotten good reviews, but it can be dusty when there's not a lot of rain, and it's very costly. So everything has a pro and con, and I think a big factor is the size of the park that you're looking at.
Definitely. Yep. Yeah, so I have about an acre because I tried to use my eyeballs to see how big it was, and I'm not very good at that, apparently.
I had mentioned to Jim, he had actually reached out to get an Excel chart, and I apologize because when you first wrote, I thought you were maybe looking for the assessor maps information. So I explained to him how to get on to our website, which is kind of interesting on the maps online. We mentioned it last time, but you don't need to try to figure it out. It's right there.
Okay.
So once you call up the site, you can actually, we can show you how to do it, and you can. It's really interactive, but you can actually look at it and see how big the site is. You can there's a tool on there where you can take it and mark off a section of maybe a site and say, what about using this area here, and it will show you how many square feet it is.
Can I make a suggestion, though? I'm a big stickler, I guess, for making sure that we're grounded around how we're gonna work together, what the framework is, what the process is. And what I'm seeing right now happening is that we're kind of jumping into like the devil of the details, and I personally don't think we're there yet. It gets back into kind of roles, responsibility, tasks, the process in which we're going to move forward type of stuff. And I think once we're grounded and have some agreement on that, then as we go through, like, okay, we're going to talk about the criteria. Well, let's look at, here's the criteria, let's use some inputs from what you got. Here's some tools in which we can kind of help flesh out some of their criteria. Here's Maps Online. Does everybody understand Maps Online? No, I don't. Okay, can we have a quick demo? And does that logic seem reasonable? Because I've been in way too many meetings in my lifetime where people go off on tangents and what they're passionate about at the moment, and everybody's going off in different directions, and nobody's on the same page. So that's what I'm offering up as a suggestion. If you think I'm crazy, by all means, you can let me know.
In that case, motion to move item 5, discussion criteria, up to above item 4, committee assignments. So we discuss that next.
Well, it depends on what we make as committee assignments.
I think if we make them off of the criteria.
It's been moved. If you got a second to that, you want to move to item 5?
Well, I'd like to throw one more suggestion. I spent a fair amount of time just kind of playing around with this stuff and absorbing all this stuff and doing a little research. And I'm not saying I have the perfect answer, the perfect solution, but I have come up with something as an approach, as a framework, as to how to move forward. And it's inclusive of kind of some tenets around, okay, are we all on the same page in terms of the overview, in terms of what's the goal of the project, the scope, some of the constraints we're dealing with, a few outstanding questions that I would have for some of the town representatives based on, absorbing the material that we now have had time to do. I've also created, an action plan that basically lists out a go-forward plan on tasks. Now, I haven't assigned it to anybody, but that's what I think we need to iterate on. Okay, how do we move forward? What are the steps that we're going to take? I've also kind of created what I'm calling a site assessment dashboard. What I cannot see as a value add is looking at 16 different pieces of paper and trying to find, okay, how do I compare and contrast? So I have a concept that I want to share with you, if you're open to it, on how we can do that. Again, room for improvement on everything I show you, and not, the holy grail in which that it's not subject to making changes to it either. I've also done some, preliminary work on a cost analysis in terms of a framework to look at the cost analysis. I've also provided some samples on kind of an outreach plan. So I do this for a living in terms of big projects, big dollars, lots of people, lots of locations. So I just kind of go with it when I deal with it, especially when I like the fact that I'm doing it for something I actually like, as opposed to working on software projects that take people's jobs away. The fact that I'm working for something for dogs, which I have a passion for, I think it makes it all that much better. So that's what I would suggest to you. I apologize. I got delayed on finishing up some stuff, so I wasn't able to send it earlier today. If we have the capability to show some things up on these 3 screens in here, and I can plug into something or send somebody something in which to post it, then I'm happy to kind of give you a framework of what I'm talking about. And if you think it's worthwhile to pursue, then we can make some fine tuning. If you think it's excessive, non-value added, we can cut it at the heels there, and I'm more than willing and open to listen to other alternatives and suggestions.
I would say only this in response, Jim, that there's no sense in making this a bigger project than it is. We don't have an unlimited number of potential sites. We have very, very few. If we take the work that the other committee did, we have 5 sites left. The 5 sites are extremely different, both in size and in composition. I think that a visit to these sites will enable a lot of you to say, that won't work. That won't work. And we'll be down to very few sites that this dog park would work on. And so I don't see spending all that time to set up criteria for each site as though we had 20 sites. Yeah, there are 20 sites if you look at that orange paper, but if you know the town, you'll know that most of those sites aren't even worth considering. You wouldn't take your dog and make a park in an area that's hunted heavily. And yet some of the bigger areas on here are heavily hunted in October, November, and December. So that, I think would eliminate them. Some of them eliminate themselves by the size they are. Some of them eliminate themselves because they have no infrastructure, and adding infrastructure to those sites would be very, very costly. So I think you're pretty well stuck, and if you can say there are other sites that we ought to look at, by all means do so. But I think if you look at Camp Gleason, 295 Leicester Street, Julia Bancroft School.
But can I interrupt for a second? I mean, what you're telling me is that you have a level of familiarity with the sites based on whatever criteria in your mind that you've arrived to. I don't know if everyone around the table has that same visibility and understanding with respect to the sites, what they do. Do we even all agree on what we're looking at? Because you can look at one thing and say it's a piece of fruit and it's an apple.
Well,
I can
let's
go
see.
up and look at it and say it's something that's an orange. And part of the plan that I'm talking about is also not just keeping things open-ended from the standpoint of time, okay? We've got X amount of hours, X amount of weeks. We have some sort of a May desired endpoint in which we want to go ahead and get something done. Well, just kind of talking about that abstractly, in my opinion, doesn't get you there overnight. There's got to be some agreement on who's going to do what, when we're going to do it. And I'm not saying it has to be a 360 page document or 400 line item spreadsheet, but we have to have some sort of basis in which we all work together, because what will happen is everybody goes off and does their own thing, and then we'll find out the progress that we've got is not what we want, and or it's completely missed the mark, and we end up having to evaporate more time. I personally don't think it's just as quick as just go out to look at a couple of sites based on. There's a lot of I read through the documents. There's a lot of criteria that people, that they're calling out in these things, a lot of questions that should be asked. If we just go out and say, oh, pick a site based on a quick and dirty, go out and site visit, we'll go back to where the town was, and they sound like they did at least more of that than what we're proposing, at least what I'm hearing you propose. We'll go out there and they'll shoot it down saying, you haven't thought through the whole process, you haven't looked at it from a 360 perspective. You jumped the gun, you made some quick assessments and assumptions, and you didn't have the whole picture there. That's what I'm suggesting.
It sounds like Mr. McGill has done a lot of work over the last 2 weeks. I would like to at least see what he's done, and see how we can apply it to what we do need to do in regard to these 5 sites.
And I would like the committee to visit the 5 sites. And I don't mind having Jim's information put up in black and white for us, or a hard copy of it. But I don't see the necessity for looking for 500 sites when 500 sites don't exist in this town.
I'm not suggesting anything in terms of number of sites. I'm suggesting a process in which we work together to get to a common goal. That's what it has nothing to do with the number of sites. Now, what you're suggesting as a task, which is how I translate it, is go out to a site, do an evaluation based on the criteria. I would record that as a step in the process, not the only step that we would do in order to get to the finish line.
No, I would not suggest that that be our approach, but I think the approach begins with the sites.
If I can interject for a second, just to give you an idea of the process that we went through when we were doing our site assessments. So we started with a list of properties that the town owns. From that list, we were able to eliminate some off the bat. So we came up with these 12 that were the most likely to fit into our dog park idea. We did go and visit every single park. That doesn't mean we spent, an hour at each site going through a checklist. Some of them were pretty easily eliminated for different reasons, because they're completely undeveloped and the cost to develop it would be too expensive. The Holstrom Field is actually a well pumping station, so while it can have the baseball field there, we wouldn't be able to create a dog park there. But every place that we went to, we did include in our assessment. From that, we were able to whittle it down to a handful of sites that we thought would be able to best fit a dog park. And then from that, we came with our original suggestion. So sometimes you do have to start big and work your way down, but it might not be as complicated to eliminate some as you might think going into it.
I'm not disagreeing with anything that you're saying,
Yeah.
but I would go back to, before you go ahead and start kicking things out, what's the criteria in which we've made an evaluation, made a decision on? Once you've done that, the early on vetting process that you're talking about, absolutely, you can go in there, and to your point, sir, knock out 5 or 6, 7 right off the bat. But until we all say that we're looking at it the same way,
Yep.
I say you run the risk of everybody making a bad decision and/or not having agreements that make this committee take on an extended life of its own.
Well, then perhaps we should go back to the motion by Sarah that says we should look at criteria.
Right.
Because there's not much sense in looking at lots of sites or lots of potential sites if we don't have something to judge those sites on. And just by the work that you've done, Nicole, you can see certain similarities in successful dog parks. And those, I suppose, should be the criteria that we use when we look at what's available as sites in Auburn.
I would agree, so I would second Sarah's motion, which as I understand it, is to shift the order in which we're approaching the process. So the next step, discuss criteria.
That was my motion.
Okay, just restating, I restate because I want to get to what you created.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So voted. So let's think of criteria.
If I can interject too, we're just trying to figure out if you, we want to be able to get what you've come up with on the screen.
Yes.
So you can, we can share it.
Sure.
You could email it to us. Did you bring it on a flash by any chance?
I don't have
And
enough
if not, we can write down, you can send it to an email and we can call it up while you're talking.
Right.
So we don't hold all of you up.
Do you want to just actually just write down your email?
No.
Do you need a signal? I can
Just too many.
put my hotspot on.
No, I think I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just too many.
Okay, okay, thank you. So this way we can, Amy's
No, that's
looking
a
at this.
petition.
She'll be able to.
It looks like
She'll
that.
be able to get it.
Looks like that.
Jim, if you want to use that and email it, we can then, listen to me, we can then go in here, Amy can then go in, 'cause she's very good at it, and we can pull it up.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
All
So
right, so criteria.
I think that there were mandatory items from the Stanton Foundation,
From the
right?
stand, yeah.
Good.
They are listed.
Yep, the orange wording.
So if we look at that one, the first one is fencing, which is, we're gonna have to implement ourselves. So,
Yeah.
in that case, I think we need to look at size. This is obviously the bigger the space, the more fencing we're gonna need, the more expensive the fencing is gonna be, right?
And probably a choice in deciding on size is whether you're gonna have small dog, large dog, and most of them do, I think,
Yes.
Nicole. Some don't have the distinction of small dog, large dog. But if you're thinking of that, that will certainly affect the size and the amount of fencing you'll need. And the fact that that will necessitate you having 2 entrances, that will increase the cost. Obviously, that's an important criteria.
And perhaps 3 entrances if we utilize the escape gate that Nicole discussed.
Yeah, a gate between the large dogs section and the small dog section, right?
Right.
So that an owner who brings both dogs can get it from one
Right,
to
or
the
if
other.
you're the only one there with a small dog,
Yeah.
then you can, and you're in the large one, you can quickly go into the small
Sure,
one. if
yes.
you need
Thank you.
to.
So what size
as a group would we hope minimum that we want this park to be? If we all agree that we would like to a smaller and a large section, would that be fair to say?
I would agree with that.
So what would be the minimum size we would hope for in that situation?
Well, if they said the average size was just under an acre,
Right around an
30,
acre, most.
37,000 square feet.
37,000,
Yeah.
would you divide that in half for a small and large, or would you have one portion larger because
Small dogs don't
large
need that much
dogs would
space,
take?
right?
2/3, 1/3,
Yeah, that's what I would think.
3/4, 1/4.
But can I ask a question? I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. So when we talk about going out to a site, right? At that point in time, do we really need to know whether it's a small dog, large dog? Don't we just need to know that we have a certain amount of space,
Right,
and that's what we're going to put there? Because
right. Well, that's why I wanted,
like a lot of these things are like design elements
yeah.
that I'm hearing
Yeah.
about, and I don't. To me, it's we go out to a site. Boom, boom, boom,
big
boom,
enough where
boom.
it's not.
What are those
Right.
types of things that we need?
right.
And then once we've gotten to it and we've narrowed it down to, here's these 4 or 5 things that meet the criteria, now you can start to fine tune those design elements. Okay, where's this gonna go?
Right.
You're right.
No, I agree, except the only reason I asked is because if that's something that we do want, I feel like if you only have one area, it could be smaller, but if you do plan, eventually when you do the details, if you do plan to have 2 sections, I feel like a minimum size would be larger than if we only wanted one, which is why, the only reason I brought it up. So if that would be our goal eventually, I would suggest a little bit larger of a park than if we were only planning to do one area, if that makes sense. That's why, not that we need to decide that right now, but if we're saying it has to be a minimum of 1 acre, and there's a lot that's half an acre, we're not even gonna go look at it. So that's basically why I'm asking. So do we think an acre minimum? Do we think, half an acre minimum?
Maybe we say, to at least just to start the betting out, 3/4 of an acre
Okay.
or greater.
Great.
And then let's see what that leaves us with, It may take off 30, 50, 90% of what's out there in terms of availability, and then we may have to revisit setting the criteria.
Yep.
Through the chair, this is online right now. Amy's called it up, so we can turn the driving of this over to you if you want to go through it here. We can
Well,
move it right over to you and you can
I'm just gonna,
share
I
it.
don't know, I know we're doing this criteria stuff, but oh, my mouse, okay. So just to kind of make sure that we're grounded on a few things, right? We all come from different backgrounds. We don't know each other very well. I don't know what you do for a living, what your experiences are, and what do you know what I do type of thing. So I honestly feel that getting grounded on some of the basics is important so that we don't run into, I didn't know that was that, So to me, we have to provide a dog park recommendation to the Board of Selectmen in May, no later than June. That's what I understand is the goal of what we're trying to do. Everybody good with that?
Yes.
Okay. As part of that, we need to provide a dog site recommendation. We need to conduct a cost analysis. We have the opportunity to contribute ideas and suggestions with respect to dog park use guidelines. And we're being asked to use data, facts, and examples to support location recommendations and cost analysis where applicable. Is that fair and reasonable?
Well, I don't know whether or not we're beginning now to exceed the charge that was given to us by selectmen. The selectmen asked us to do 2 things. One, provide a recommendation on the location for a dog park, and 2, come up with a cost analysis for that location. It wasn't to establish rules for the use of the park.
Okay, so let me point out the language I've used, right? Because there was one thing that was brought up in our last meeting that the town said that if we would like to, and maybe we need to vote on that, but the town suggested, threw it out there, if we would like to contribute to the guidelines, we can. I'm not suggesting there that we take the ownership of establishing the guidelines, but clearly there's a lot of things that we've talked about and we're seeing in terms of our own resource, then we may want to put it on a bucket list and then pass it over to them and let them format them, let them organize it however they want to do it, type of thing. That's all I'm suggesting there. And as far as number four is just really just calling out how we're going to support doing number one and number two. So I don't see that as really an added step at all. It's just saying that when we put our stuff out there in front of the board, in front of the town, we got to speak more with data and facts and examples as opposed to our opinions and how we
Right.
feel and what we might think.
Can
So,
we add to number 4, please?
Sure.
Just throwing out for discussion, of course.
yeah.
The idea that Julie had discussed, the creation of the fact sheet.
Right.
Oh,
Good
yeah,
point.
I'll agree with that.
Around the education approach.
okay, no, it's going to be.
All part of.
I'm looking at that screen thinking, why am I updates not happening? It's because the file's been moved.
As far as saving it, Jim, it'll probably save to this and then we can just email it back to you.
Okay.
Thank you.
If it's easier, I don't know how good your eyesight is, there's also the screen right next to you.
No, my eyesight's good. It's just,
That's what I was looking
I mean,
at.
I
For
have,
those who need to look
I
distance, and you're looking over your
I
head.
have multiple monitors in my home office, so I mean, I'm used to all, for my command center, everything being there. Okay, anything else anybody want to add there? Everyone good with that?
Yeah.
Okay. So these are just, it's constraints that came to mind based on the conversation. 12 Upland Street is not to be considered, so that's a constraint. Now, I want to make sure I understood this, and this just could be just me, but, no available town funds available for the project. When I read through the Stafford information, it kind of called out that the town would be responsible for 10% of the construction costs. So I wanted to get some sort of clarification on what's our stance on that?
The Fur Friends have committed to the town that they would raise the 10% and donate it to the town.
So
So the town would have to provide the 10%, but the source of the provision of those funds would be a donation versus tax levy dollars.
Okay, so then with respect to maintenance, is that the same process or is that
The
different?
Fur Friends did commit to assisting with the maintenance of the park. I think we mentioned at the last meeting, we anticipate there would be some level of a cost to the
Right.
town for maintenance.
Membership, yep.
Depending on where it is and what site it is, that cost could be very minimal, or it could be larger than minimal, which is the cost analysis that the board is looking for.
Right.
Certain sites, if we already maintain them, for instance, the site is no longer, we're not looking at this particular site, but if we were to pick a site that the town already maintained, then there are very few additional maintenance costs because it's already being mowed.
Right.
If it's a site that we're not maintaining and we have to do that, there's a cost. So the town anticipates that there would be some cost to maintaining this because we maintain other parks.
Right.
Recognizing that the Fur Friends has committed to offsetting that cost, and we are looking to offset those maintenance costs by charging a user fee
Right.
for the park.
So just, and I'm just playing devil's advocate, if I'm sitting in a town meeting and I'm somebody as a taxpayer who's sensitive about taxes, right? And I hear, oh, the Fur Friends are gonna come in, I'm gonna be saying like, who's the Fur Friends? How are you guaranteeing, if this is a $200,000 project, and that's potentially, maybe you take 20% off the top for design, it's 180,000, you off the 180, now you're looking at 10, what assurances are you gonna come up with the 18 grand plus the 4 grand annually to do that? Do we have, and we don't have to get the fine detail of this right this second, but I just want it from an order of magnitude, are we in the ballpark?
So the Fur Friends, I can't exactly speak on their behalf, but knowing them and having formerly been a part of that group, it's an interesting situation because there are many members who are ready to help the town with this process, but basically there's a cost to becoming a nonprofit organization, and it's about $700. So they are waiting on the Board of Selectmen's approval on a site before officially becoming a nonprofit group. That doesn't mean they won't do fundraising necessarily before, but the problem is then what do you do with the funds? That is something that actually Uxbridge, the woman who I spoke to from Uxbridge, who's also on the Board of Selectmen, is kind of running the dog park situation, and they have a revolving account with the town that people can donate to. So that was something that I also wanted to bring up tonight, and potentially discuss that with a member of the Fur Friends group, so they can begin fundraising in advance, which may alleviate some concerns, like how are they going to come up with $20,000 or $15,000, whatever the cost may be.
And I guess, and when is that potentially needed, right? Is that,
Right.
you know, is that dated
That's a
on
great
day
question.
one, or is
Right.
that on day 100? I mean, that's something
Yeah.
I see as, you know, potential risk.
Yeah, but inviting, like I had said earlier, and you even said last week, inviting a member from the Fur Friends might be a good idea to one of our future meetings to help get a little bit more information.
So I would, like, I don't know, can I bring a motion? Okay, just have to get my meeting skills, recalling that. I'd like the motion that we get that on the calendar so that we can get, you know, kind of how they're approaching it, that takes you kind of out of conflict of an interest,
Right.
potential position. Because I just think that, you know, if somebody's on the hook for $20,000 and it's a nonprofit, I don't know, I can see a lot of people trying to poke holes in that, you know, from the other side of the fence.
All seconds.
Been moved and seconded that we invite a representative of Auburn Fur Friends to the first available meeting that they have. Is that agreeable?
Okay.
And if I can jump into, to follow up on something that's probably important to raise this, and you know, Ron, from all your work, and you mentioned the conflict of interest.
Yes.
We did talk about it last time. I know some of you have already taken the test. If you haven't, please make sure you do that online. But one thing I need to point out, members of any town board or commission are not allowed to fundraise for for a related cause, because it is a potential interest. So when Nicole says she's formally a member, that's
Right.
she's doing that so she doesn't have any conflict.
Right.
Once this committee is disbanded, anyone is welcome to then go join the Fur Friends and do some fundraising. But so as it stands now, I think it's a great idea to separate yourself and all of you from the Fur Friends and invite them in to speak separately. I think that's
Point
makes
of
sense.
clarification, please, with regards to membership of the Fur Friends group online. Does that imply membership of Fur Friends?
No.
I don't know how it's set up right now.
I've never joined Fur
Yeah.
Friends per
I'm on
se,
Fur Friends.
but I have joined the online group.
I don't
comment
believe just
anymore.
joining an online blog or social media
Yes.
chat room or what, I'm not getting the right term, but I don't believe joining that constitutes doing fundraising.
Right.
I think it's actively going out and asking people for money for fundraising for a specific cause that then you are voting on or having some kind of influence on.
Thank you.
That's the difference. So,
Thank you for
yeah,
clarifying.
dialogue is, I can't imagine that it's not okay. It's when that dialogue moves to action, where actually someone interprets your request for a donation as a quid pro quo,
I
which is
understand.
why it's there.
Thank you.
They do, if I can, again, kind of speak on their behalf, but not really. They do, however, even though there's the group on Facebook, they do have a small group of those members that do meet and have established positions, such as President Nancy Sarkeesian. I was formerly the treasurer, but stepped down, so some of those positions are changing. But there are established members in that group. So there are the Fur Friends Facebook group, which is anyone who, we hope all of them, but anyone who's interested in having the town have a dog park. But then there's also the people who kind of run that site. They have a small group that meet monthly or whenever they felt the need. So there is an official group within that group, if that makes sense, that are kind of heading it all.
So there's a motion on the table to invite a member.
To invite a member,
Yep.
or members of the Fur Friends group to first available meeting. And when I say available, it's when they are available to come to one of our meetings. I say that because we know that the president has gone to Florida, and I don't know I'm the
There are
lucky
others who
woman who will be there.
Yeah, there are others who could attend,
Yeah.
I'm sure. Yeah.
And who will reach out to them?
Can you reach out?
Sure, I can. Yep.
Thank you.
All right, committee resource availability, potentially a constraint, meeting space availability, potentially a constraint. Just want to make sure I understood, that the dog park site location must comply with zoning regulations, you know, for that district in which the dog park is being proposed. Is that accurate?
Any proposed dog park would have to go through site plan approval,
Yeah,
through the planning board.
Right.
So at that time, things will be looked at such as zoning. I mean, if it's not allowed in a certain area, you would need a variance, and maybe some areas don't allow for that at all. So yes, zoning applies.
But
All local state
so on that point, would you then would it go, like I saw the sheet there with this picture that kind of took like, you know, this zoning, you know, attributes, right? Is it like the same as like buying, putting a house on a place? Like for instance, you have to have so much frontage, you know, type of a thing, because
Have to comply with all local and state zoning requirements, which are setbacks, front, side, rear, buffers, and those types of things ultimately go through the site plan review process. So even if you were to select a site and kind of lay out where it's going to be on that site, it then still has to go through the whole site plan process. Amy, you were involved in, all of you looking a little bit at zoning.
Yeah.
I think all of these sites zoning-wise are okay.
I don't recall having any issues with any of them.
Right.
And then when you look at some of these, like Camp Gleason, ones that are currently ball fields, things like that, they're already zoned for recreational use. So you're not, while you're going to make modifications to the actual land, if you choose one of those sites, the overall use of the land doesn't really change.
Is that also the other list of sites that we were given? Do we know that those have also?
Let me take a quick look.
Potential for recreational.
Okay. Right. Okay.
Here would be my suggestion, without blanket saying yes to all of them.
Right.
If we can come back and look at the zoning for you.
Yep.
In general, I would tell you the majority, if not all of these, are already zoned as either open space or recreation.
Okay.
In which case, a dog park under zoning is a recreational use.
Great.
So you should be fine, but we'll double check it for you.
Great.
all right, so one thing I would say we could add to the plan is once we get to maybe like a top 3 is what I would propose at some point, and when I'm going over here with you all. That's when we go out and have them go ahead and, before we go ahead and talk to everybody, here's our 3 sites, let's make sure that we don't have to take one off the table because of the zoning issue. All right, any other constraints that anybody can think of that, that are worth calling out? They don't have to be ticky-tack, just kind of big bucket. All right, some of these I'm just gonna go through real quick.
Going back to,
I'm
Go
sorry,
ahead.
I delay process thinking here. Going back to constraints would be a butter/community opposition.
Good point,
Yeah.
good point.
ADA accessibility, I think, would be a big
Yes,
constraint.
accessibility. Lack of
Thank you.
infrastructure
Yes,
is it's a constraint in that it's a cost. It's not,
to bring,
you
yeah.
can't, it's not a deal breaker, but it would go into your overall cost.
Cost.
That might take away from the ability to actually build the park out, unless it was a smaller park and you put a lot of money into the infrastructure.
Right.
But that can be.
But it also,
that
I
can be
mean,
a
when I
constraint.
quickly look at like these constraints, so the first one I'm just throwing off the table, and I'll update that later, but, all right, the risk is the funds for the project. Well, we gotta get a for a friend thing, okay? If we're gonna have a butter opposition, how do we deal with that? We need an outreach plan to deal with that type of stuff. So, meeting space and committee resource, that's just like, okay, let's continue to iterate on our availability, and when we can meet together and that will work itself out type of stuff. The zoning is what it is. All right. We're not limited to the sites that are in the assessment. The usage, I'm just throwing out a quick thing, usage fee, we basically say we put towards the cost of the dog park maintenance. We already talked about the Fur Friends. I think we all agree that selecting a site with existing infrastructure would be more cost effective.
Yep.
Okay. I've already covered this in the standing thing. I saw this on the website. This is another kind of thing, it said that they're expecting to make funding changes to the dog park grant program in early 2017, is what they called on their site when I went through it. And my question is, do we have any visibility into what these may be and potential impact? Because that, to me, could be, again, risk management 101 here, that could be a problem if it's something substantial. So maybe that's something that, one of us makes a call on to kind of understand, well, what do they mean by that statement? Do we agree with that? I mean, that's...
Yes.
Do you know?
No, as far as I know, they haven't released anything publicly. We haven't asked directly. They do have a phone number listed on the website. I have spoken to them in the past, and they're pretty responsive. I had to call, leave a message. They got back to me within a couple hours, so.
I mean, I'll volunteer to call them if that needs to be second, third. I mean, I'll defer to the chairman.
Do we have to vote on it?
No.
Okay.
Okay, we've talked about number 2. Just want to confirm, so when everything's approved, is it the town that's going to submit
Yeah,
everything?
the town administration submits, and it's required that we have a board vote authorizing the submission of the application, which therefore is authorizing the site that we're submitting for.
Right.
But yeah, we would do that.
All right, so these are maybe dumb questions to some of you who may have more experience in the area than I do, but I don't, so I have to ask the question. So how do we confirm if a site has access to public water and public sewer? Do we just, walk on by and see that there's a house next to it, they must have water, it's a done deal?
Our DPW can do
I
that.
think,
Yep.
DPW can do that for electricity as well?
yep.
Okay,
We should be able to, I mean, if there's any questions, we can, yeah. Yes.
okay. We just talked about buffer requirements. Any requirements on the height of the fence? That was just a
Yeah,
5
it's
feet?
according to Stanton, it's a minimum of 5 feet.
5 feet, okay.
And according to our zoning, our fences cannot exceed, I believe, 8.
Right.
So,
And the other question I had is, we had 2 documents that listed out the parcels that are available. One of them, if I can steal yours for a section, is this. The other one is the colored one. The colored one kind of calls out whether or not, what the square acreage is based on what's there on the town record. It talks about whether it's in a water shed area type of thing. Can we get something similar for the ones that are in this? Because I didn't see that this was a one-to-one match to that.
well, they're from 2 different sources, but this one does have the acreage. Each individual sheet has,
This one,
oh,
it
this,
does
I'm sorry,
not.
it didn't. Okay, we have it though for each, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's one of the reasons why we did want to pull up the
site.
assessor's database for you guys, because you can pull up the assessor's card for each of these locations, and it tells you the
we can
acreage on
answer
there.
that then.
Yeah, it would be good to show you how to use that.
As for things like wetlands,
It's on that side too.
it is.
Yeah, it's a layer.
Yeah.
on the GIS.
But again, if there's any questions, you can always ask. Some of the sites, it's obvious if there are wetlands there. Some of it's a little less, especially if you're there in the winter and not during a wet season. But
Yeah. Okay, so that's kind of just we're on the same page, Olivia, and some of that was my own selfish benefit, so I apologize if I had asked some of those questions, because I felt that I needed to know the answer in order to go forward. As I said earlier, I'm not saying that we need to have, the rock star of how to work together approach, but I'm also going to advocate that we can't have nothing, because I've seen that fail in too many situations in my career, when everyone just thinks that we can just all get along and, through the graces of something, we're going to just make it happen. So we don't have to go through each one of these, but what I've done is, complete, committee setup. We've gone ahead and we've talked about some of these things already. Finalizing roles, responsibilities, putting together a meeting schedule, what's the tool set for how we're going to work together. Who's the committee liaison for the Board of Selectmen.
Yeah, if I can jump in on that, they took a vote at their last meeting not to have a committee liaison.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, they decided that, they just said, look, the committee's put together. Doreen Goodrich had come to the meeting, there was a lot of discussion, they said, we trust the committee. And you're gonna be making a recommendation back to them, so I think they felt that they didn't want to hamper your efforts or have you feel uncomfortable with one of them there when you're going to be making a recommendation to them anyway. So the meetings are all open to the public. Several of them will watch it on replay, and some may actually come and just sit in the back and listen, but they do not have an official liaison. They just
Okay.
sit against.
Well, we can make that up then. So, basically, I'm not saying we have to make, because obviously you're not all gonna digest every I and T if it's on this, first time seeing it, but now that it's up on the share, you can do it. But I think what I wanna point out is, I think it's important that if we agree on what's here, then we then can put names in boxes so that we have clear accountability on who's doing what, and then we can easily see that, okay, Jim, you may have taken on 17 things, probably not in the best interest of the committee to do that, let's scale that back type of a thing. And then when's it due? Because to me, if you leave things open-ended, then it doesn't create a sense of urgency, and before you know it, 6 months of the calendar have gone by, and you're all wondering why nothing's gotten done. So that's kind of what I'm sharing, suggesting there's a few notes there. But, next phase here is kind of what we're starting to get a little bit into is, what's the go-forward plan around, the collection and the assessment. So, to me, is review the concerns and questions that were identified in the past public meetings, and identify any sources of documented record. I don't know if there was meeting minutes that were put together that we should take a look at. To me, let's learn from lessons learned. Because it sounds like people were a little maybe on the hostile side going into that meeting. Let's find out exactly what those concerns are so that we have some sort of suggestion or remedy on how to deal with that for our own recommendations, so when we get caught, we live in a deja vu. Some of this has already been done, so these are just not completed. We talked about an interview question list for what you have provided here earlier, and then consolidate the findings, which you've done, and present those findings to us, which you've done, and then finalize the site location options list, right? What's the form that basically captures the criteria that we're looking at? Because I don't agree that everything that was done within the town is necessarily a complete list based on what I've gone through and quickly researching. Have the forms available up on the cloud so we can all access it, because I don't imagine that all of us are going to go out to every site. I suggest site visits into 2-person teams. We conduct the site visits, you post your information up on the cloud, storage. Then at one of our future review meetings, we review those forms that have been submitted. And then from that, we have the data that's, and I'll show you a quick dashboard view of how to look across, 5 sites or 10 sites or whatever it may be. And then we can identify what our top 3, locations are, and see what type of additional analysis and community outreach efforts we need. Prepare a preliminary cost analysis. A lot of that's probably going to be reusable. You're not necessarily, maybe you have quantity that might increases for one particular cost attribute from one site to the other, but pretty much they're going to be standard, so I don't see that being a lot of duplicated effort. So once we've kind of done all that, we've got the top 3. What I would suggest is a checkpoint. Let's make sure the 3 things that we throw out there meet whatever criteria that the grant is coming from, right? Because if they're not going to pay for it, we just did a whole lot of work for nothing. Define, what our plan is for the residents nearby these top 3 locations, if that's applicable. We may be in a situation where we're trying to put it against an existing, park, for instance, where there isn't residents, so maybe we need to, approach it differently. It's not the same thing. Execute the outreach plan. Typically those when you try to communicate to large groups of people, it's not a 24-hour service. That you're going to get answers back. So you have to kind of build that into your plan. Consolidate and document the findings. And for things that are issues or concerns, we've got to be able to speak to them, in my opinion, when it comes time to making a presentation to the board, so that we can basically say, here's why not. Update the cost analysis, for the final thing. Schedule a review date with the board, communicate the meeting date to the public, create the site recommendation. And I don't know if we're going to do a document, a PowerPoint. How are we going to communicate what we're talking about here? We're just going to show up and just talk, because I don't find that that's a good way of doing things. Finalize the plan, finalize the cost analysis, execute the meeting, hopefully get approval, and we're home. Thoughts?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Also, that wasn't me. You don't
We'll change all the,
Yeah.
I got that one.
I just want to make sure, I don't want to take someone else's credit.
You can have it all.
And it's all her, it's all her credit. I didn't do anything.
So,
happens.
again, I know we're all digesting this for the first time with the exception of myself, so please look at it. If you want, I'm open to suggestions. You want to add something, subtract something, something's a duplicate, you see a typo, by all, I just think it's critically important in order to get to end of job, you need to have alignment on how we're going to work together and move forward, and what the times and the owners of the tasks are, or you're not going to get there. So,
I'll just weigh in on the storage. We had spoken to our IT director, and we can't set up storage through our systems because you can't access it externally into an internal system.
all right, well,
So
Is
his suggestion was to use
How-
just,
I was gonna say, how about a Google site?
Yeah, I was
Or
just about
Dropbox
to say,
or
if
Box.
you
his
could-
suggestion was to have one of you could set up
Sure.
a
Okay.
Dropbox and use that.
Okay.
My kind of recommendation and warning is to be careful that it's just for document storage, that there's no dialogue that takes
Right.
place.
Right, yep.
You know, so you're
so
not deliberating.
to that point,
So
just for
just
point of
don't-
clarification, so we
Yeah.
submit a document up there, there's no taboo around, any Ron or anyone else making some updates to that document, it gets saved, and then, if we're at a point where we're gonna review something on the document, we print it out,
Review it in
and
the
we have it
meeting.
at the meeting, that's legit.
Correct,
Okay.
but you wouldn't, and you can review them individually, you can each go into this site and look at what's
And look
there.
at it. No, you
And-
can't do it as a board.
Exactly, but don't do it as a board, don't have any discussion about it, just have your discussion at your next meeting.
Right, I wouldn't make any comments directly on the sheet, about the sheet.
Right,
Right,
right, no
okay,
comments
yeah,
on the
yeah.
sheets,
Right.
that's a good way to put it, yeah,
Yeah,
so,
that's great.
no place for you to, because if you put a comment, somebody else sees
Right.
it, and then
Right,
you've already
right,
deliberated
yeah.
before you get here. It's just purely for data dump, to put the
So,
information in,
Google
so.
Drive.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
good. Yeah, Google Drive is great for that.
It's- Yeah.
All right, somebody
Yeah,
want to set it up?
Once I got up and running,
Yeah,
you
I've
can
got
see
them all.
everything.
I could
Yep.
see everything.
I got them all out
Yeah,
there.
you might as well.
Everything was great.
Thank you. And
course,
thank
it
you
was yesterday.
so much for putting this all together.
Yeah, this is great.
Obviously, you did a lot.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
All right, so moving on to the next, please. And we don't need to get into all this, but I want to give you, and this is not 100% how I want to do it because it gets a little dicey. The challenge that I had is the questions are not asked in such a way that they're consistent. Some of the questions you either ask yes or no. Some of them might be, well, it's available, it's presently available, it's somewhat available, it's not available. So trying to kind of find a consistent contextual way of answering each question consistently becomes a little dicey, okay? So I'm not asking you to approve the deep devils in the details. I'm asking you to approve the concept. And the concept is what I'm suggesting is here is, one, what's the ideal site? Which then goes back to the criteria that Ron is called out, okay? And then, based on each site, how does that, the criteria map to it? So now, what do my reds and my greens mean? Based on how I define ideal site, and this is where, we could change, I basically said, okay, that's green. But in some cases, an ideal site, a green positive could be the answer of no. Right? In some instances, it's the answer of yes. So that's kind of where it gets a little dicey, right? But the net is, whatever we establish here as a criteria is what we got to agree to. And then over here, by seeing each site and kind of right up and next to each other, you can quickly begin to do sorts and filtering on what's good, what's bad, and how do you get to, the top three pretty quickly. So again, I don't want to get into all this stuff because I think this stuff will change and move around.
Based on that.
This is
Yeah.
what really what's going to get onto. But do people buy into the dashboard, a one view of all the sites
Absolutely.
Yep.
that rolls up?
Thank you.
Okay. Because what's interesting is, when I just did, just some quick counts, okay, on what the positives are, right? Right, based on the criteria, and again, this is how I interpreted my answers to each one of the questions that was on there. So number 10, in terms of, we'll call it more desirable than other sites, Camp Gleason, okay? The Town Hall was another one. And then based on these answers, the Senior Center. and there was one more that had a lot of green in it, type of thing. 12, right? So that's just, by using the criteria and agreeing to kind of how we're going to score the criteria, it begins to tell a quick story of, all right, well, who's even in the ballpark, real quick. And so again, the concept is what I'm saying, do you buy into? Because you see what the criteria is, you can do the comparison. Because we may be asked a question by the town or by the board, well, how did you come up with this? And well, here's what we did, boom, 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 here you go. What would you like to know next? Okay? And this is just drawing from this data here that was provided, from the town. Okay? I'm not gonna, this is something for you to look into. This is just a quick budget kind of template that I put together. It's broken down by different categories. Site work, hardscape, softscape, infrastructure, waste disposal, amenities, total project costs. So when it comes time to doing the cost analysis, again, if you want to tweak it,
Right.
by all means, tweak it. But I mean, what I learned in my quick and dirty analysis, this is not rocket sciences, and we're not the first people that are going to the moon on this either. There's a lot of communities, both here within Massachusetts as well as nationally, that have done this stuff. So we don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel, per se. I just threw this in as an example, when we get closer to around the outreach plan, because I see this as a critical component in getting this thing passed. And this is just an example of what somebody did, a county that I came across, where they did some surveying at public meetings, right? And they passed out survey, because the hard part of a survey is, well, where am I going to get it? When are you going to submit it, type of thing. And then you're chasing people and you get 2% of the surveys back. But if you would have some public information, type meetings that said, maybe 5 people show up or 50 show up, who knows? But then you pass out a survey and say, here's what you got, answer whatever the questions. And don't be, again, the questions can change, that type of stuff. But it begins to tell the story of what the public wants, and then how you can ensure that what you're proposing is very close in alignment to what they want, because if it's higher in alignment to what they want, the likelihood that they're gonna have less opposition is gonna increase. So
This is wonderful.
Something that
Yeah.
our friends did.
What? Is this outside the scope of what we were
I
asked to
think
do?
that
I say that
It's beginning to
respectfully.
get outside the scope.
I don't see how you get this approved without doing it. Because I guess the question I would ask then is, are we about just submitting a budget, and it's about submitting a site
Site.
location?
That's
Or
what
we
I-
about,
Those are the instructions.
okay,
that
well, let
we've
me
been
add
given.
one more thing, sir. Or are we about making it successful?
No, we're
Because-
not about making it
Meaning-
successful, because I think if we say, you must do this to make it successful, people are gonna resent, the people who are gonna raise the money for this project, the people who make these decisions for the town are gonna resent that. If we're gonna say that the Auburn Fur Friends are gonna have a large role in this, they're not gonna want to be told,
But let me clarify, because you're going down a deeper trail that I wasn't traveling on. All right, what I'm saying is, success to me is the board approves our recommendation. That to me is success. And does everyone disagree? That's what we all want, right? 'Cause we're not, because
Agreed.
provided our recommendation is what they're looking for.
That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. I mean, all in terms of taking someone else's jobs, taking on additional roles of responsibility, which is kind of what I'm inferring from your comments. I'm not suggesting that at all. I'm just saying, what is success? Success to me is we've got the board of selectmen that says, this is good, right? We don't have the town, a whole bunch of town people that are in that meeting saying no, 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 no. Okay? So in order to try to ensure that we have less opposition, less no, 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 the way you do that is through an education and awareness process, which is how you do it through this. You need to give people the opportunity to be involved in the process. They may choose not to be involved in the process, but go ahead and try to stick something down someone's throat and not be able to give them any forum in which to do something. The likelihood that they resist and say no, thank you, increases exponentially.
I hear what you're saying absolutely from a macro perspective, from a project management, implementation perspective. I hear you. But from what our mandate, from what I understand the role of this body to be, is a very limited scope. And I hear your definition of success, but I think have surpassed our goal.
I would like to ask, when you brought up that this is a bit outside the scope, what specifically were you referring to?
I feel that the survey, I think that crosses the line of what I understand our scope to be.
So, as far as the survey, I feel like if it's in this format where I feel like it's important for our cost analysis to find out what people want, so we can get the prices on those things.
I understand that. I hear what everyone's saying,
Right.
but I go back to what I understand our tiny piece in the puzzle to be. That, you know, we're one cog in this process.
I guess the question becomes, who are the stakeholders in this, right? Is the stakeholders the Board of Selectmen? Or is it the stakeholders, the Board of Selectmen and, you know, the public? Is it one or the other, or is it both? Because I guess, you know, what I heard from the town in comments that they've made is that was one of the reasons why the proposal, you know, didn't pass in the first place. So what I was advocating there, from, you know, what I also found to be substantiated from the research I did is that that's a critical part in trying to make the project successful. And that's why I asked, you know, what's success? Because, you know, to me, success is the board approves something. This is a means to help get there. And again, I wouldn't get caught up on the survey. It could be a public meeting. It could be, you know, there's a lot of different ways. It's to me, it's one step higher. Are we going to do any outreach to educate some of the folks out there on the site, why we recommend it, the pros and the cons of it, so that when they hear it for the, you know, the next time for an official vote, it's not like danger, danger, danger. What do we do here? And then, oh, we're going to resist because we didn't know, and no one told us anything. This is the first time we're hearing it.
No, I think that's an important piece. I think the community outreach is a very important piece. Now, how far into that we go
That's my
into,
point.
whether we simply meet with neighbors within a certain vicinity, along a certain road,
Sure.
door-to-door type stuff, or invite them to a meeting, send out a letter, like the town did before the Board of Selectmen met. See, that's kind of what I'm looking at.
So what I would say to all of this, right? I mean, the devil's in the details. And what I was doing, my intent, you know, my goal is to kind of get us on the same page in terms of an approach and a process, not necessarily make every fine-tuned decision on every step in the process. All I'm suggesting, if we all agree with, we need some sort of outreach, whether that's a
Absolutely.
survey, whether
Yeah.
that's 10 minutes worth of our time, whether it's 4 hours, that's what we need to discuss perhaps in a future meeting. But do
Yes.
we all agree, in order to make the project successful, that one of the steps that we need to have in our process is an outreach plan? That's what I'm
Definitely.
that's what I'm putting out
Absolutely.
there
Yep.
to the group at this point.
I definitely agree with that, for sure.
Okay.
Yep.
So to sum up, I mean, there's a lot of stuff here, right? I think what I would suggest is, again, everyone take a finer, you know, spin of the document. I think, you know, we can get back to, you know, what's the criteria for visiting the sites, and kind of, you know, maybe somehow, just another thing, I don't know how you people feel about this, but I'm a big fan of visual. And I think sometimes if someone's just writing it on a piece of paper and no one else is seeing it, it gets kind of hard to kind of remember in totality all the things that are being discussed. So as a suggestion, if we're going to define what the list of criteria is, would it hurt us to put it up on the board, up on the screen, and create it in a document on the fly so that we could iterate faster and get to an end goal quicker, as opposed to just throwing things out there and maybe not catching it?
I prefer it.
Okay. Then my memory knows when it starts to go down, you know, once we go over 7, you know, past 7 o'clock. I don't know, everyone else is the same, so just a suggestion.
Once again, I think we've gone away from the criteria. And I think the criteria would make our task easier. Now, we know that we have to have an area, and we've agreed that it has to be 3/4 of an acre to an acre. Maybe bigger, maybe smaller. That a lot depends on the site. You could take sites off this, you could take the senior center, and there is no area up there that is 3/4 of an acre, except for the parking lot. You're not gonna take their parking lot, I'm sure. You could look at 12 Upland Street, and we know why there was public opposition to that, because there were houses in the area. Well, some of these have no houses in the area, or very few houses in the area. Again, that would help to cut down the number of potential sites. There's not much sense in discussing a site that can't meet the required characteristics that Stanton is looking for. They're looking for certain.
So I don't think that we're disagreeing with you at all.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying that maybe we should put that
And that's kind of
early.
where I'm suggesting is where we're at right now is let's establish and agree upon what that criteria is in which to evaluate those sites, because I just don't think it's the size of the square footage, right?
Yep.
No, I think that's a throwaway. That's a breaks the deal bit
Yeah,
if
absolutely.
it's too small.
Sure.
Right, so we only moved on to these documents because we were talking about the requirements while he was getting them set out.
Right.
Now we've gone through them, so we can go back to
What is our
talking about the
criteria?
criteria.
Exactly.
Through the chair, can I just make one comment? I would also suggest taking a look at what the grant actually funds, because some of the stuff, so the design phase of the grant, it covers 100% of the design grant, but that 100% comes from 10% of the overall budget.
Construction
So it's
budget.
not an unlimited fund where, you know, say it's gonna cost $50,000 for design grant. It's not unlimited. In that portion of the grant, it says it in the packet, that covers preparation of schematics, preliminary drawings, bid documents, construction observation, and if necessary, site surveys. So the actual, drawing of a plan, things like that would be done through the design grant. It's great to go into things with an idea of where things are going to be set up and all of that, but having that actually be done is part of the grant. And they do have money available to hire professionals to have that done. And then as for the construction part, because that also has some limitations, it's hard construction costs. So things like added features inside of the park, it's great, we know people would like that, but it's not necessarily covered in the money that we'd be receiving. So what the hard construction costs are defined as, it's the subtotal of labor and material items for the construction. And it says the hard costs do not include bond, overhead, profit, contingency, or other miscellaneous expenses unrelated to labor and materials. So it's great to have an overall picture of the perfect park,
Right.
but for the grant itself, there's the criteria that they want per park that's built, but you also have to look at the criteria for the grant itself when you're thinking of budget items.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yes, that and the cost analysis.
And I think through the chair, I think it's also a great idea that you are inviting the fur friends to come, because I know we've had prior discussions with them, and at one point, and maybe that will change, they had indicated that they felt a 50,000 square foot park was too large, that it should be in the 25,000 square foot range. So I think it's important to get them in here soon, because if they are participating financially and they have some ideas themselves, that may weigh in on your decision for how big it is. And basically, I think the reason for the size issues was the cost. They didn't want to see something so large that it became unaffordable to maintain, because if they're going to be helping to maintain it, they may not be able to do that. So I think it's really important to get them to weigh in, whatever criteria you're looking at, get some feedback from them as potential funders and obviously future funders for this, to see, do you want to see a double access? Do you want to see a small and a dog? And again, I don't want to speak for them either. I just know that they've had a lot of conversations over 50,000 is too big, 10 may be too small, 25 may be perfect. Given the right site, 60 could be great. It turns into how
Depends on
much
the site,
is
too.
the cost of the fencing. So I really recommend we, include them in these discussions.
Yes, yeah.
So to just rewind to your point around who we consider the stakeholders to be, do we all agree, or is there a consensus that the Fur Friends should be considered a stakeholder in the
I
process.
think you're bringing up an excellent point,
Yes.
absolutely, because
Yep.
we've got to vet out a little bit about their piece of the pie in this, because they're like, it's like a table with like, 3 legs. You take out one leg and it falls
Right.
down. And in my opinion, if we're friends, is that one leg that falls down, and we just did a lot of work for nothing.
They have to, ultimately, we don't have numbers yet, but they're going to have to commit to a number,
Indeed.
so.
So I just want to build on what I heard you say is, so what I'm hearing your suggestion is, when you establish your evaluation criteria, ensure that it leverages what the Standard Foundation is going to, provide as part of their funding. Is that what I'm hearing you?
Yeah.
Okay. And I absolutely agree with you 100% there. I guess the other question I would then ask is, do we want to throw any additional evaluation criterias, call it personal evaluation criteria on top of this? Or do you have any constraints to do that other than, the cost piece of it?
I mean, I think definitely the personal aspect of it is something that we were looking for when the committee was set up, to get the residents together to find, what is important to you as a community. Because we can look at it from building a park, but to look at the users of the park, what's important to you, that's a big part of it. I mean, you are the target people for the project. So it doesn't have to strictly, your assessment, go by what the town's already looked at, what the Stanton Foundation's asking for. Everybody here has great ideas, it sounds like, so everybody might have something else that they're looking at each part that should be brought up.
Okay. So I guess to that, I mean, is there a particular page within this thing that kind of lists out the criteria? And if so, okay. And just to, is another piece that I'll throw, I would say that this is primary in terms of requirements, because
Yes.
we don't get the grade.
Correct.
But it just as something else, a quick thing I can show you up here is, again, there's a lot of information of people who've done these dog parks before, and some of these are already put into what we've got a little bit, but just so we can take a quick spin through that and, maybe spawn some additional ideas of other criteria we may, consider. So I guess my question is, how do we want to do this? Do we want to create a document in a form? Is someone going to take the lead to do that? And then, how are we going to rate things? And again, we may make a decision that says, all right, well, we don't need to. Here's another option I'll throw out to you. So if we have 10 sites and 3 criteria that that we deem as mission critical, right? And we have a strong feeling that, if we went out there and looked at those 3 criteria, it's going to tell us a lot real quickly. Well, then we don't necessarily obviously have to get into the minutia of the smaller details for that site. Take those off the table real quick. But obviously, when we get down to more of a finite set of here are the real possibilities, then that's where I feel that we're going to have to get into the deeper mechanics of it all. Does everyone agree with that kind of concept?
Yes.
Well, I really hesitate in going over what the other committee did. They limited to certain areas. Now, I really don't think we should be at this point saying, let us add to the list, because I don't think there are hidden gems out there.
I wasn't say that we add to the list at all.
Didn't you say 10 or 12?
I just throwing out a number
Yeah.
out there.
But they've narrowed it down to 5. What would you add?
It depends on what the criteria is. Until we agree on what the criteria is, and
See, the 5 criteria on Foundation Design Review Process, which says this is not an exhaustive list, but these must be included,
Okay.
which is fencing, potable water, shade, dual double gate entryways, and surfacing.
Okay.
So-
I'm good with all those.
Yep, what would you add for sites that would comply with those?
I can't answer that question, I don't know anything about the sites.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I'm not
Let
so
us
sure that
look,
I-
either look at sites or go out and, I don't know where you're gonna look to come up with more sites, Jim.
I'm not suggesting, I have not said once during this meeting, Ron, that we go out and we add more sites. I haven't said that once.
Okay,
All
if
I'm
we're
saying
then
is,
down to five
before you go,
sites.
whether it's 5 sites that you're fixated on as 5 sites, what are we going out there to look for? Okay, so when we're starting to move in that direction, when we start looking at this list,
We looked at
this is a
size,
starting point.
Right, if we look
okay?
at size,
What else do we have to add to the list? That's where I'm going, is the next
potable
step.
water supply.
So, all right, let's talk about water. Obviously, it would be cheaper if it was a site that already had water pumped to it,
Mhm.
not one that we have to, hire
Access.
plumbers and dig access to. Obviously, right? Agreed? Yes. Okay. So we want a site that already has water in it. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Just want to make sure we all agreed on something.
It doesn't sound like I mean.
I'm
that's
actually
much more
hearing a lot of
cost-effective.
agreement.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah, I agree.
process
I think-
oriented.
The question, I think, Ron, you're looking at the sites, which were the original 12 sites that were recommended.
Mhm.
But I think what we're talking about is some of the other sites, such as Granger Cliffs and behind the Pappas Recreational, the cornfields. And we need to decide whether or not we would agree to simply look at the sites that are remaining from the 12, or if we do want to indeed look at other recreational areas in town. And I think the problem is, Ron knows those areas very well, but not everybody
No,
does.
And I don't mind anyone who feels that they can find the gem of a site going out and saying we should add Ranger Ledges to our
Right.
list.
And in order to do that,
But
We
you'd
need
have to go and
criteria.
look at it.
And we need to
And
look
I
at
don't
it.
mind going with you, I'll take your word for face value, I got no reason not to. If you've got 5 sites in your mind that you think are gonna meet most of the criteria, and we all agree on what the criteria is, I have no problem starting out with going look at those 5 first.
And through the chair, I would say that the board did have a discussion when they asked us to put the committee together, that said that they absolutely would encourage you to look outside
Correct.
of the original sites.
Right.
If you see a reason to do so.
think we
So
should.
it's fine to do it from a board perspective and from your mission.
Yeah.
And I know you're,
Yeah.
trying to stay on mission, which is good, because you can get lost in it. So yeah, it's fine to look outside of those original 12. And yes, as we said, we narrowed it to those 5 initially for various reasons, because some rose to the top and now
Yes.
those are no longer there.
Yeah.
Some of the ones that were eliminated may end up back on that list.
right.
Right.
And
But
certainly
you can
look at
see
this.
by looking at what made the final list, why they rose to the final list.
Right, correct. And one thing I've just noticed, as I'm looking at this, just I'm thinking ahead on the zoning that we're gonna check on, but on this list that was done,
Yeah.
again, this was over a year ago by the Open
Right.
Space and Recreation Committee. I see 20 Elmwood, which is the third from the bottom. That parcel was sold
Okay.
at
I
our
saw that.
foreclosure auction
Got it.
Thank you.
recently, so it was actually purchased by an abutting commercial property.
Okay.
And
Maybe
it's
we're
right
on
on
the list
Southbridge
to look
Street
at.
anyway. So yeah, that one would not be on here. And we'll just double check again this was a list that was looked at by
Yeah.
the Open Space and Rec Committee. They started well over a year ago, and we just wanted to share it with you. We can
And this
certainly
was
look at
pretty
it.
exhaustive in terms
It was, they did a
of
lot.
public lands.
And so let's pick a
Some of
starting
these cross
Right.
off immediately, Cemetery Road. You can't reach from Auburn. You have to go into us up there to Huss Hill.
Right,
That way you
certainly.
get there.
And through the chair, the GIS mapping and the assessors database, I can't stress it enough, is going to be very useful to you. I'm not familiar with every street and every parcel in Auburn, and that's something that really helped my initial foot into this, because you can pull up each parcel, you can
Yep.
do an aerial, you can get a satellite image of it, you can put different layers on it, so you can, and again, not everything is necessarily listed in it, but you can get a rough idea of wetlands, so stream crossings and brooks through a property. You can look at the contours of the land on it, because having a dog park on top of a cliff, not necessarily the best idea. So really, it's a very good tool, so you're not going out to 50 site locations, but you still have an idea of the area that you're looking at.
Right, you can do a lot of it, as Amy said, looking at it from here, in your meetings, you can go home and look at it on your home computer and get an idea. And certain sites will self-illuminate because of the topography, the wetlands, the streams, the crossings, the lack of parking, the lack of available buffers, etc.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to think of a way in which we can kind of ground where we're all at, because I think we're all in slightly different places in the process, but we're all saying a lot of the same stuff.
Yes. Yep.
So I'm hearing we need criteria.
Yes.
We need criteria. Do we agree we need criteria?
We need agreed upon criteria. I think that's, and that we all understand,
Okay.
okay?
But I guess there's 2 ways, there's probably 1,000 ways to go about doing this. But I'm hearing,
2 different ways. I'm hearing from Ron, we have 5 sites that meet the space requirements. Therefore, what is the criteria that we as a group need to develop? Or, as Julie said, there are other sites that we could potentially explore should
Yep.
we choose to go on a field trip in Auburn or use the GIS tool. So
Right.
which of the 2, or is there a third that we should determine and then go to the criteria piece? Or
I would, based on what you're saying, I would suggest the following. If we are able to say, you know, that there's a top 3 criteria that we can agree to, and I'm thinking, we basically, I'm suggesting we iterate as opposed to try to, you know, paint the whole world and walk away with nothing. Let's determine what our top 3 criteria is, compare that against the available parcels that we have, and see what that weeds out. And then based on what that weeds out, we'll all then have an agreement that, you know, number 7, 8, 9, off the table, we all agree with that. Okay, now we're left with X.
Right.
Okay? Then what's the next level of criteria we want to go ahead and put against that next set, right? And then we go off, and maybe at that point, because maybe this first set, based on what I'm hearing in terms of resources, Maps Online, if we agree to 3 criteria and we all can just go to our Maps Online and take a spin through that, I mean, I've used it for property assessment purposes, so that's not an easy, difficult tool to use, then we could potentially quickly get through, okay, if there's 10 on the list, or 5 on the list, boom, it meets this criteria of these top 3, now we're down to 4. And then at that point, what's the next layer in which we're going to slice it off at?
okay.
Is that reasonable?
I think it's reasonable, and just to go back to, we are at discussion of criteria for evaluation. Let's
Right.
do it.
Let's do it. So we know first tier is going to be matching with Stanton requirements, which we've already stated is fencing, minimum 5 feet, max 8 feet to meet town laws, water access, shading, which I don't even know, that could be so open, I would think.
Yes, and
A
they
few
make it that way.
trees.
It can be trees or it can be artificial shade.
Right. Artificial shade.
Which for some of these sites you would need that because they're just
Yeah,
empty fields.
right. The double gated entry and ground cover, I don't know exactly what that,
Surface, I
Yeah.
guess you should say, yeah, ground
surface.
surface.
Surfing choices.
okay.
Which is
So-
something we're gonna have to deal with later.
But what we'd say, like, when we look at those what you just said, right?
Right, yeah.
I mean, fencing doesn't really have anything to do with the site,
Just-
right?
just the
Unless
size.
unless it was on the ocean.
You're
Right,
right.
just the size, I
Yeah.
guess I should say,
Yeah.
yeah.
So potable water, I think that's
Yep.
that's a site criteria because
Right.
that's going to tell us if it's there
Water
or
on the
it's
site.
not.
Yep.
A shade, yeah, at least if it's the, you know, real shade as opposed to artificial shade, we're gonna know
Right.
that real quick.
Yep.
The double gates, I don't think applies in the
part
first
of the
round
fencing,
because that's
yeah.
part of the next piece. The surfacing might be good to know in terms of what's there, is it usable?
Right.
You know, in terms of a
Yep.
grass location versus it's, you know, a surface that
For
we'd have to import.
infrastructure.
So clarify,
Right.
what is existing surface?
Existing infrastructure, we could call it, and water access seem to be the top 2.
What about electrical? Is electrical a big one?
Electrical is part of the characteristics that the town used.
Right, but it's not a,
I don't
On
think
the-
it's not
requirement.
mandatory. It might be nice for lighting, especially when.
Well, yeah,
Autumn.
and they, would you
Yeah.
want a park that's lit? Because some of them talk about that, would you?
I would actually argue against that, because I think that may be a problem with the butters,
Yeah.
and additionally, I don't think many people are gonna be using the park after dusk. To be
The other
honest.
thing, I'll throw this one out there, just, you know, what about irrigation, right? Does irrigation have any type of electrical component? So if you ended up with a grass field, would you need to have, you know, access to electrical?
And to go back to the
Some of
lighting-
these have
Maybe,
them,
yeah.
others don't.
Right.
And just to go back to the lighting piece, I guess the argument could be made conversely, that lighting would be a deterrent to some of the activity that I saw noted in the sheet about, you know, people coming to the park in maybe it was reading I did outside of your comments, that people were using the park for, you know,
Oh,
little
before,
activity.
yes, but they were doing that before it was a dog park.
Oh, okay.
So they
Okay.
were, originally, they weren't so thrilled, but then they were like, oh, well, what's the park being used for now? Drinking, drugs, etc. So they
Okay.
replaced that with
I understand.
dogs,
Okay.
and it's closed at dusk. So they're not supposed to be using the park after dusk, which means people were trespassing.
Mhm. Okay.
But that was why.
So that resolves the
Yes,
issue.
it resolved
Okay.
their issue for sure.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, but I guess, is it a top tier electricity? That I don't know. Is it a top tier requirement for? I don't
For irrigation,
I don't.
There is
I don't know
another
what irrigation.
list in the material that they sent that has different characteristics. It
Right.
begins with safety, noise, maintenance, location, sanitation.
Where are you seeing this? So,
Um,
through the chair?
It's right
Yeah.
after the green sheet, is the best I can describe it.
Through the chair. It's also listed in a separate document from the Stanton Foundation. It was, the document's called Guidelines for Establishment and Maintenance of Successful Off-Leash Dog Exercise Areas. So it does have those bulleted items. It has safety, noise, sanitation, location, maintenance, substrate, rules, and dog park clubs. And it talks about each of those points individually.
Okay.
So I'm hearing size and water
Yep.
is two things. Do we all agree with that?
Yes.
Okay, but must-haves, we'll call them
Yep.
must-haves for iteration one.
Must-haves. Yep.
Okay. What about abutment? Do we want to try to,
That's nice, too.
is that a high one that says if there's 4 sites that are out in the wilderness that necessarily aren't, right on by somebody's backyard, is that a more attractive option for us potentially?
I would say yes. I believe.
Yes,
as-
but then you'd be careful about
Right.
how far
far
it is
out, right.
away from services that you might need.
Right.
Okay. So is it fair that we can add that as a criteria,
Yes.
but we might have to put some, some language in the comments of what, okay,
Right.
Location.
As few as possible, but we don't want to be, miles away from.
And we know that
society.
from past
Right.
history
In the
that
woods.
there can be opposition
Correct.
generated by the nearness of residential homes.
I also want to put ADA compliance
ADA, yeah.
at the top of the list.
Right.
so to add on, when I think of ADA,
Right.
yeah, I think of accessibility.
Right.
Okay. So do we want to add to that, do we want to make this something that you can just drive to? Which obviously is going to impact, space for parking, potentially cars on the road.
Right.
Or do we also have, the preference to have the ability for some people to walk to it within, what's a 10-minute walk or whatever?
Depends where
Type
you
of
live,
thing.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, I have to drive here, but it really depends on where in the town you are. But as far as accessibility, I'm thinking more like stairs versus ramps,
Sure.
things like that.
Yep.
Some of these places might already have stairs there already.
Right.
So, in which we'd have to install a ramp.
Through the chair, I could. Wetlands is also very important because if you have, a stream or a body of water that's right smack in the middle of any of these properties, you're going to get hit with a lot of conservation restrictions.
Right. That would be part of the ground surface, though, right?
Oh,
Would that
yeah.
be considered that? Wetlands, like the. Because that was something
Yes
to
and
my
no.
mind. Okay.
It's a separate issue. You have to
Okay.
look at whether it's a delineated wetland or just happens to be a site that has some water issues per se for irrigation purposes.
Right. Okay.
And is that something that gets, if you look on maps online, do you see some sort of delineation if a parcel has some
Yeah,
sort
we
of
always
wetlands?
suggest that we look at it even further, but on our website where you can look up all of this, it will show the wetland
Okay.
delineations. There are different layers that you can click on. That's an important one.
Yep.
It does trigger Conservation Commission, and sometimes we found some sites that might have looked great, but you had to cross over wetlands to actually get to it. So
Okay.
the site itself was okay, but you had to go through a wetland to get to the
Get
site,
there.
which meant a lot of cost.
Yep.
and a lot of restrictions.
Okay.
And same with the ADA. The ADA, you know, we want it to be ADA accessible, but some of these lots, Ron, you mentioned a little earlier, the topography of it, you know, if they're too sloped, the degree of the ramp becomes an issue, so it has to go maybe out this way as opposed to straight down, and that's very expensive.
We
So
have
that's the
sites
cost.
that look like good sites, but you couldn't get them
Yeah.
if you had the
Unfortunately.
Boyd Street School site, which is on the side of the hill, right size,
Yep.
very nice, but it certainly would not have ADA accessibility.
I would probably guess that most of the sites, that would have to be built in to whatever you go ahead and do there. The majority of it would probably fall into that category. What about, like, this, when I did some research, this one came out, you know, and I guess this kind of counterbalances against the abutment stuff, is, you know, visibility of the location. And why would that may be important? Well, if, you know, if it's out of sight, out of mind, you could potentially have higher, you know, chances of vandalism, problems, people going to hang out there. Again, if you have no lights or whatever, so is that something we want to kind of at least be aware of when we go ahead and take a look at some of these places that, you know, it's not necessarily, you know, on its own island, and, you know, may the force be with us in terms of whether or not it will stand strong in absence of bodies.
Yes.
So
Right.
safety concerns.
Yes.
Yes. Safety / visibility.
Adding also whether it's already maintained by the DPW, that's huge, because that's gonna be a cost that residents who may not be in great support of this project, that might make it a top priority to make sure, or hopefully it will be an area already maintained, that it doesn't add a great cost to the town. Taxpayers.
Similarly, parking.
Right.
There's already parking,
Yeah.
it's there.
Great.
If there isn't, it's creating a parking lot, very expensive. Any type of striping adds to it. So yeah,
Right.
I would put parking. You know, if it doesn't have parking, that's fine. You just have to look at the site as to whether it can have parking and then calculate that into your overall cost analysis. Maybe the site becomes smaller because you have to spend some of your money on parking.
Right.
So I guess what I've heard is we got like about 7 criteria,
Yeah,
right?
you state them again,
Yeah.
please. Yep.
Size, water, abutment, environmental habitat / wetlands, you know, whatever else you want to call. Safety / visibility. You know, maintained by, is it parks or DPW?
Yep. ADA
Parking.
compliance. And ADA compliance also, did you say that?
Yeah.
Although I think you did mention that anything we build is probably gonna have to add.
No, well, yeah, I would say that ADA is a requirement for the grant, you know, without question, for the first part of our assessment to go out there and do this, you know, broad stroke, quick and dirty, all right, what can we eliminate? I don't think that makes or breaks us, because I think there's a high probability that you need to build that into whatever site that you get.
Unless it's a very high cost. So that would be the only thing that I'd add. So if, for example, talking about how far out it is, or if we need to cross over a wetland, or if we need to create a ramp because there's not an existing ramp, I think that's the only reason it would become a factor.
So maybe because I see that kind of what you're talking about is distance, and maybe that's the criteria, because the distance is going to impact potentially how far you log the water line.
Right.
If you put electrical, how far that's going to be. If there's an entrance way that needs to, you know, come from the street, how long that's going to be. ADA accessibility, so maybe distance,
Right.
you know, from the street. You know, is it?
Yes.
So distance from the street would be otherwise prohibitive of additional criteria.
I would say distance is just a way to say, all right, is this, you know, 100 feet, 10 feet,
Right.
1,000 feet, 2 miles away?
To road
from-
access.
to-
Yeah.
It's like, for instance, at the Cheryl Maloney dog park that's in Dennisport or right around there. They're right on the highway. They're literally on the highway. And they have a little parking lot that's like this big. And it only has, I want to say 8 parking spots and 1 handicap spot. And that's paved. And you've got a little country fence around the 6 spots or 8 spots. And then you have literally just a little bit of a walkway. So in other words, when you got to the end of that walkway, you could not take like a wheelchair or somebody that couldn't walk. You couldn't go any further than that. So I don't know what their requirements are, but that I always, every time I go there for vacation, I think to myself, wow, man, one of these dogs is going to come out of this fenced-in area. They're going to bolt and they're just going to get smashed by a truck. Because it's like, when I tell you it's literally on a highway, it's on a highway where cars are going 50 miles an hour. And so you have to have your dog on a leash to come in and out of the park. But I always questioned, geez, you know, the gate to the park is way past where the actual cement ends, and it's all beach sand. And then around their fenced-in area, they have a whole lake to go around. You can walk your dogs, and nobody really monitors it. But I always thought, geez, you know, they really don't have a lot. But everything is right at the beginning. Like their electricity, their water, their everything is right at the very beginning where that little fence area is. And then they have the small area and a larger area.
Right.
And I always thought that was very interesting that they had like the minimum amount, the very minimum amount that you needed. And maybe that's because they have access at other places, but it was very, very small.
So, I guess what I would suggest, I mean, it sounds like we have an agreement around 8 or 9, you know, attributes
Yeah.
in which we can then go evaluate these sites. So we're basically defining the what we'd like to, you know, see or, you know, type of thing. Now I think we, you know, in the interest of time, you know, let's move into the how and the when and the who.
Yep.
Right? Because that's where, you know, your money gets made.
So for how, do you want to show us the website?
Yeah.
Sure. I just have one more thing that you might want to look at as a criteria is, because you mentioned distance from like the road and things like that, but the
Right.
overall topography of the space that you're looking at, because ADA was thrown out there and all of that, but if you have, like Ron mentioned, the Boy Street Tot Lot, which you go out there, you're in the actual park, it looks like it would be perfect.
Right.
You look at the driveway and you look at how you're going to have to construct parking there, or potentially add stairs and ramps. You go in at a very big slope, so you would have to cut into that, add support to it. So
Right.
things like finding a more flat parcel is going to be easier for construction, easier for meeting ADA compliance, things like that.
Do we all have an understanding of the ADA compliance? I mean, I
Is
think
it
some of us do,
ADA
some of us don't.
compliance, or does, I think they say in here somewhere that you must give ADA consideration. I don't think that it has the current rules for, say, public buildings or schools, which
Right,
are
well,
very,
it's
very
not the
difficult to
same.
meet.
And that's
yeah.
a good point, because we do have to follow state requirements and any local bylaws as well.
Right.
So, and that comes into play when you actually get to the site plan approval process with planning board, but it's good to think about it now, because you don't want it to get shot down because there was no way to comply with it.
So I think that topography is a good thing to add, because it's going to give you some insight on the ADA issue as well as some cost issue, other cost issue type stuff.
Okay.
Okay. So in terms of, we've got a list, right? We can put that, you know, in a tab on it. We all agree that maybe using one spreadsheet or, you know, one list, and we
Right,
can
with
change it
different tabs
with
in
different
it, so it's
tabs
all in one.
is a good way of doing it.
Definitely.
So we can put those up there, and do we all agree that we want to look at the sites that were, I mean, Ron says 5, but are you able to go ahead and just kick out a few of those that are in the document that has, not this one, that one,
This one,
not that one,
not that one?
this one.
That one, I don't have the complete. You have a couple more sites than I had.
Do you have 6
These
or
are,
11?
these,
That's 6.
yeah, these 6 are what I have. Minus 12 Upland Street, which we know
Right,
can't.
and then we also had this sheet
We
as well,
also
which
have
is out of
Counterpoint.
date, but
They're
can,
not-
items that, with the exception of 20 Elmwood, can also be considered.
Right.
Yeah, except some of them really are beyond consideration. The ones on Cemetery Road are up by the Jewish cemetery, which can only be reached by going up Dead Horse Hill and can't
Right,
be.
that's. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Can I jump in for a second? Did this print out double-sided for everybody or not?
No.
No, I think that's the
No,
problem.
That's the issue.
yeah.
So that's what's
That's
So I
the
can
issue.
go
Yeah.
make copies of this,
Right.
to make sure everybody has everything,
Right.
and I apologize for that, because
'Cause
that's
that's
my fault
missing.
printing
Yeah.
it.
And if you want, while you do that, I can just show you quickly the website.
Yeah, what's it called? The
There was
DI,
something
GIS?
GIS.
GIS
So you're gonna go on our
GIS, right,
homepage.
right.
Okay.
Oh, let's write this down. Let's write this down.
Thank you.
I'm gonna have to turn my back to you because I, unlike you, cannot see that far. I can see it. So this is our homepage.
GIS.
Great.
Go right down the center, and you're gonna click right here, see where it says maps, online, and assessing data?
Yeah.
You click on that. There is just you're acknowledging that you've read the conditions, meaning these don't represent legal lot lines, that can only be done at the registry of deeds.
Sure.
It's
Okay.
as close as possible, but the registry has it. And that's our disclaimer, and so just click out. So right here, see where it says find? On the left side? You're gonna click on find. And for instance, let's look at,
Parcel numbers.
339
Any
Rockdale.
address or
the first
parcel
one of those.
number.
okay, what is it?
339 Rockdale.
So Rochdale, you click on Rochdale, and you put in your number, 339.
Yep.
And then you click on that.
I'm gonna have fun with this.
So
Everyone's gonna go look.
here is the parcel in gray. See this
Okay.
here? It's outlined in yellow, it's in gray. If you want to see it in the context of, a little smaller, you can zoom out, you can zoom in. If you want to know, see this little identity key here?
Yep.
If you want to know who owns the parcel beside it, you can click on that.
Wow,
And
okay.
it will show you over here
is
who
cool.
owns it. Let's see.
So it's almost like, I guess what I'm sensing here is if you're not familiar with this parcels, maybe the process is look at it online, maybe print a few things out, then go out and physically view
Okay.
them, and then you
Right.
start,
Right.
seeing
Yeah.
what's going on.
Yeah, and a couple things I just want to show you that
This.
you might find.
Layers, yeah.
Right, so if you see, I'm just gonna make it a little smaller for purposes. All right, so if you click here on layers,
Yeah.
here's where you can add parcel labels, acreage labels,
Yeah.
buildings contours,
Okay.
which you're gonna wanna see. You want-
Wetlands.
There's
Yeah.
your
There you go.
topography.
Wow.
There you go.
There's your
See where
wetlands.
it's
That's what we're
still
looking for.
prospects and approach.
There's your wetlands, there's got aquifer districts,
Yeah.
you got utility lines,
Great.
tracks,
Oh,
you've got your zoning, you have soils,
See
which
those,
may or may not be an issue here, depending on what kind of surface you want to put down. I wouldn't look at that right now.
No, no,
It like overwhelms it. So anyway,
If we have a timer, maybe.
yeah.
so there's all your different layers, and if you want to look at a Google Street Map right here, you can click on that.
Oh, that's great.
And if you look at the Google Hybrid Map, you can look at that. At that point, personally, I get rid of the layers because you want to see the layers. You don't want to see that when you're looking at that, see?
Right.
So, and you can go in closer. Let me see here, sorry. And you can also do the street layout. You can print it out. What else can you look at? You can look at the actual card itself. So let me go back here, because this will be one more thing that you can use. Auburn Town, click on here over parcel ID, or right here, tax card, see on the left where it says tax card? You can open the tax card, and here's all the data that we'll have. You can see that the land is exempt, tax exempt, you can see the size. If there are buildings on it, it'll tell you that there's buildings on it. Right here, your acreage.
Yeah.
If there's something on it, like right there is a communications
building.
tower up in the landfill, you're gonna see that, a picture of it. So there's a lot that you can get from this particular
Thank you.
program. So it should help you. And then you can print things, you can zoom in, the street view, which is really, it's fascinating because you can actually bring yourself right into the parcel and see what it's like to be in there. Is it heavily wooded? Is it not? I personally, I think it's a great tool to use.
Yep.
And you can look around and see what's around there. You know, this is a nice view. Right here, there's no infrastructure, but you can look and you can see how close our house is.
Okay.
Next to the train.
So, I guess she's coming back with a list, which is all gonna help align us on what the total number is.
I believe that would be the 11.
Okay. So do we want to split the board in half or everybody would give it as 11? It's not going to necessarily take you 10 days to look at it. Do we all want to look at it at each site individually, you know, and then come back with what our thoughts are? Do we want to split it in half? And then when we're going to get it done by?
I would recommend each member take a couple to look at. That way we can get in the nitty gritty. And rather than everyone looking at everything.
Are you talking about online or physically?
Both.
I think you have to do both.
I think you'd have to do both too.
Yep.
Unless you could eliminate immediately by looking at
Unless you've been there already, you already know the
Right.
answers to the questions.
Right, which you may know, and in your book it's out.
Yeah.
And part of it's opinion too, to be
Yeah.
honest. You know, you're
Yeah.
like
Yep.
tearing these and,
I just want to show you one more thing while we're here.
Sure.
So this is Camp Gleason parcel.
okay.
Here's the long driveway into it. For instance, we wanted to look and see how much land was right here.
Okay.
So what you can do is you'll make it a little larger so you can see.
Okay.
And then right down here, can you see where it says right here?
Yeah.
Measure area. So you can put your data points. So let's say you want to stay within this side of say you wanted to put it at the end of the driveway. You can go like that,
Oh, spiffy.
that, and let's say you went that. And it will show you right here,
What the square footage is.
square footage, 12,636 square feet. So you'll be able to, and then, you know, you can also, then you can eliminate that, and let's say you already know you want to put it somewhere, you can do here distance, and what is the distance from there to the end of the property? 69 feet. So you'll have a good idea of what your buffers are too. And again, you don't need to be that specific, but some parcel may look great until you plot out your 30,000 or 40,000 square foot, and then you realize, we don't have a buffer, you know?
Right.
So I think it's a really good tool to use.
Thank you.
It's not an engineered survey, but it gives you a really good idea.
It helps with the vetting process.
Yes.
And to be clear, that packet has 12, but we were told not to look at the upland.
Mhm.
Okay.
Right.
Right, correct.
And I would like to also add these.
Mm-hmm.
While you may be super familiar with just about everything on here, most of us aren't.
Yeah.
No, I would welcome them.
Yeah, I agree.
And,
I s- yeah, second.
And so I would also like the information on these properties as well.
So
So
then
what
we're
number
looking
does
at
that
a
bring us to?
considerable number.
Right.
These do not include those, right?
No, they don't. Minus the Elmwood.
Right.
So it looks like,
Well, some are too small when you get down there.
I mean, if we look at the lower ones, it's
Yeah.
like 0.26.
Should we
of an
eliminate
acre.
some
We
immediately?
could probably do that right
Well,
there.
maybe, and then, like using that, so which ones can we eliminate immediately without even having to look at them?
Well, those of you that go up and look at the Gilbert Stockwell property, which is one of the larger properties, it's off Barn Street, would find that the access into that property is rather difficult. It's just an old, overgrown pathway that goes through someone's side yard to it. It also, the property also butts the Auburn Sportsman's Club. So that in hunting seasons, it's pretty heavily hunted around the
So based on this, I'm only seeing maybe 6 to consider off this list. Anything above the 30,000 square feet worth of acreage. Everything below that, you know, Barnes up to Rochdale, would be something that we add to our list of what's there. Everything else appears to be too small off the bat, not worth our time to
Yeah, you wouldn't
play
even be
around
able
with
to
that.
put parking lots in the smaller ones, so,
Right.
yeah.
Does
I'll
that
agree
also
with
include the Sportsman Club that would we, or would the club get that one out?
No, the Sportsman's Club's not included on any of these.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
So which ones have been eliminated?
Everything below
Barn
Barn
Street.
Street, so Cemetery Road down.
Whereas Cemetery Road down has been eliminated, got it.
Any others?
Are there any others up here?
What about, I mean, I don't know from an address perspective, but I've heard like, you know, Mary D, I've heard, what's the other school there?
Those
Are they
two are on
included?
the-
Mr. Bancroft is in our
You
list.
can put them back on. We originally looked at it, and I'll tell you, one of the main reasons we eliminated was we had an advisory committee for the elementary school reuse, and they recommended, and the board agreed, to keep those as playgrounds. Now, is there an opportunity to combine it? Potentially, but that was something that they were very adamant about
Right.
using. And then some of the fields are in heavy use.
And I agree with that, with keeping the playgrounds. And also, I think it was brought up last time we met that it's not a good idea to have dog parks next to the playgrounds
Yes.
because of the children can activate dogs.
Mhm.
So,
We also don't know what those properties will be used as, and, you know, so that may be something to just stay away from.
Well, we come really late to the game because
Ah.
for a while, all flat land that was next to schoolyards became ball fields. And first it became baseball, Little League, and then it became softball, and then soccer became popular, and if there was a piece of flat land that you could fit a soccer field on, that's what it became, so that many of our school properties, either in use or out of use, have fields attached to them. Many on that list of 5 have fields attached or adjacent to them.
so we have
Yep.
these,
There's 17 in total.
yeah, so
Okay.
now these 12
my
plus
question.
the, what is it, 6 from this one.
12 in this minus the ones for Upland gives us 11,
Yeah,
plus the
right.
6 on the street gives us 17.
17
All right,
sites
Can I
to
just
look at.
ask, did you eliminate some of the ones here because they were too
Small.
large?
Too small.
Too small.
Everything
ones
from
at the very
Cemetery Road
bottom.
down, everything's done.
Cemetery Road down.
But some of them are 27 acres, 24 acres,
Yeah, I think
12 acres.
So that's acre size, not foot.
That's not square footage.
Okay, that's acres, so we should,
So it looks like there's 20.
So I'm sorry, we're not-
Alright,
I don't-
that's-
yeah.
that's a whole different
Okay,
ballgame.
I would,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, and the thing is, realistically, you don't want to take a 50-acre parcel and put a dog park halfway
Right.
into it where you can't do anything else with that parcel.
Yes.
But maybe there's an opportunity to put a dog park at the
Is
perimeter
there.
part of it.
Yep.
And you're still, as long as you're not cutting off access to the rest of the parcel,
Right.
I'm just saying, don't eliminate it based on the fact that it's too large. I didn't realize you
no,
thought that was square footage.
yeah, so my brain has a hard time imagining an acre. I want to say that we maybe want to include everything down to the 5-acre one, nothing below that. But I again, I have a hard time picturing what an acre looks like.
an
Well,
acre-
you
acre's a
want
good
your
amount of
park,
space.
it is. I think you were originally talking about maybe 3/4 of an acre. Maybe you could even, you could look at a half. It's gonna be tight for parking and others,
Yeah, that's
but,
the other, I was thinking about parking too.
you know, 3/4 to
I mean, I think everything is on the list except the last 2 now.
Okay. For an idea of like acreage size, the playing field behind town hall,
Right.
I think that's between an acre and an acre and a half of green space.
Okay.
So,
Right.
'cause I'm also very bad at visually
I have no idea
determining
what
acreage.
Soccer field.
Yes, that's a great example because it's used heavily in soccer season. It's got the playground. I don't know that it's used anymore for softball.
So to be clear, on this sheet, we will eliminate the bottom 3.
That's correct.
Okay.
So now we have a lot more.
Yeah, I think it's what, 27, I think?
And I think if you look at some of these, you may eliminate them based on access issues.
Yeah.
Yep.
So for instance, the Granger Cliffs, there are 3 Granger Cliffs parcels per se listed on here.
Can be reached from BJ's
Yeah,
or
take a look
Home
at it.
Depot.
Okay.
Take a look, because
Okay.
we don't want to say no to anything, we
Right,
want you
not
to look. But
Oxford Street.
Yeah, I would recommend that we.
I think when you look into it a little further, you may find at least 2 of those, you're not going to be able to put anything, there's not enough flat land.
So I think as, with the bottom 3 on this orange list, plus 12 upland, that's all we eliminate tonight. And I think that we look at everything else between now and the next meeting.
How many is that? Just out of curiosity, if we're gonna divvy it up.
Can we get the electronic copy of this one?
I think I would also recommend, and again, it's up for discussion, I would avoid the landfill right now.
We can't use it anyways, right?
Because
Yeah.
it's still under DEP guidelines. We are looking at it potentially down the road for solar. So it's got the potential for something beyond what it is now. And whether we can or not, that still remains to be seen. But the concern was that there is a firing range up in that area.
Yes, there
And
is.
I just think with the police firing range being there, it's probably not an ideal spot for a dog park. And I don't
No.
want to,
You're absolutely
Agreed.
right. There's a firing range, there's an ATV trail along the railroad
go
track.
there all the time.
and there is no infrastructure there, which is one of the reasons it's very hard to look at it for.
So which one's that?
That's the
Then-
Rochdale.
So that would be
Rochdale.
339
One we just looked at.
Rochdale,
Rochdale.
All right.
as well as 335 Rochdale.
Alrighty. And with the town assessment of the 12 parcels, obviously 12 Upland is off. We included it because it was something that we assessed, but the Holstrom Field, so that is the baseball or softball field at the end of Southbridge Street Court, that was eliminated by the water district to us
Right.
because of the aquifer zone.
So there's 10.
It's helpful to have those on there, Amy, because it gives us some of your reasoning in picking those particular
Yeah,
sites.
because again, that one, at face value, when we went there, we thought, great, it'd be perfect, it's an underused park.
Right.
It does have parking established, relatively flat, but then getting that piece from a different department, there's layers to everything.
Cornfield.
That,
I know.
Cornfield is,
I'm looking at the wrong list. Okay, yeah, so the cornfields, that's on the initial. I would look at it again, just to, we should probably tell you why we had eliminated initially, because there were some wetlands surrounding it. Our initial thought was to use the existing parking lot at the Pappas. When you go down to the Pappas Recreation, there's a parking lot on the right. Put some type of an access from that into the field, and there are wetlands crossings. It doesn't mean it can't be done, it just added to the cost of it. The other option is to go in off of
Cutting Ave.
Cutting Ave, which is now a dead end, which again,
Yeah.
you're talking about extending a roadway. But you could look at it again, because, we're willing to see if there's another way to do it. It's a nice parcel, it is near Pappas.
those of you who wanted
Yeah.
to visit that one would probably do better going down Cutting
Right.
rather than trying to go through the jungle that's between Pappas
It's tough
and-
to
Yeah.
get to, but, it's interesting. It's a large site. It's just unfortunately, it's almost surrounded access-wise by wetlands.
Yeah.
Right.
Sorry,
Yeah.
we're at 26.7.
17 on this sheet, right? There's 21, I get 21 on here, minus 4 that's been disqualified. 2 at the bottom, plus the 2 at Rochdale, is there 17 on this?
I think there's 16 on that.
Yeah, Elmwood is also, it's
Elmwood
been
is off
sold.
too.
Oh, Elmwood, okay. Which one's that?
It's the
Oh
third
yeah,
one
Elmwood has been
that's been
sold.
sold.
Yeah, that's right. Put some numbers on these things.
So 16 and 11, 27.
Wait, except 10, right? Because
10 from the pack.
10
Yeah.
from the packet because the baseball field is also
Right.
The
So,
Holster baseball field.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
10.
Yep.
So 26
Yep.
is what we're looking at.
26.
Too many packets. I know.
26 properties, there are 6
Oh.
of us here tonight.
What I'll do is I'll add these to what I got up there.
Sure. Okay. Sure.
Okay. On Lemansky, we want to mention something too. We looked at 2 different areas in Lemansky that have nothing on them
Yeah.
right now. There is a practice field there that we've bantered around a little bit. The problem is it appears to be used a lot. I'm trying to get you some data. Mr. Prouty had asked me to get some data on field usage, so we're working on that right now. There are a couple of different leagues that use that
Bottom of the
field.
hill, the Auburn
Yeah.
Youth Soccer uses it.
They do, and so does the football.
That one.
Lacrosse.
They do. Okay.
I think
And
it's
plus,
heavily
plus, I
used.
mean, plus the quality of that field is garbage.
And it's
Yeah.
right next to the playgrounds.
Yeah.
And it's right next to a playground.
Yeah.
So we want to say, when you look at the Lemansky, what you see here, that is not on it. So the areas that we initially looked at did not include that practice field. We don't want to tell you not to look at it,
Right.
but we eliminated it for a few reasons.
Right.
That's the
That makes
land
sense.
you're saying between the playground and the
Mhm.
baseball.
Right.
Well, it's
Okay.
it's directly behind the tennis court.
Okay. Yeah.
So right after the hill, right behind the skating rink.
Yep.
And there was one other piece that we were looking at Lemansky, what our assessment was based off of. The only space that was unused at that time
It's up on the
was
hill.
on the top of a hill.
Yeah.
It was maybe 10,000 square feet.
Mm-hmm.
The top of the hill was relatively flat,
Yeah.
but it had other constraints with it. It was the lower entrance if you're coming in off of
Rifle.
Rifle.
Breithel, thank you, and you're coming along the driveway. It's up that hill right at the far edge of the track.
Two questions. Granger Cliffs is in the packet, but also in the orange sheet. Is it different lots?
No.
Well, there's 3 different parcels
Right.
of Granger Cliffs, so they are different parcels per se. But the one we looked at, what is
This
which
one,
Which parcel?
I don't remember where it is in here. That parcel is the area,
775 Washington.
yeah, and I think the area ended up right next to BJ's, but not the direct area next to BJ's because the town doesn't own that.
Okay.
It's in the woods.
Right, so on this,
The corner.
775 Washington, on this list was what was looked at on this list.
So that is
25, now we're down to 25.
Okay, okay. And then what's the street, this is a random question, the street in the industrial park, that's the park,
Let's see, which,
I don't
Is
know.
that in here?
Is that on this?
No.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
I know what you're talking about, the street in the industrial park.
There's a park.
Do you mean?
Oh,
park
Franklin.
here? There?
Franklin Field,
Franklin Field, Franklin Park?
that's or was.
That's a baseball
Heavily
field,
used
and it is
baseball
used,
field.
yeah, because I live right around the corner, and it
Yeah.
is used, and there's a playground that's used. Every time I walk by with my dog, there are kids' daycares in the playground. Yeah, that's right around the corner
Isn't there
from
another
me.
parcel there?
I don't think so. There are basketball courts.
I know that's what I'm
um,
referring to.
Basketball courts, parking lot, basketball courts, baseball park, playground, basically. Go there a lot. But I don't think there's any extra unused land there.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so we're down to 25
Yes.
to look at.
Making progress.
Progress.
Yes. Alright. So, and there are 6 of us tonight. I don't want to give Mr. Bregman work that he's not here to accept.
Homework.
Just give it all to him.
Oh, you didn't know?
Oh, that's what happens.
You didn't watch it on YouTube the next day? We talked about you the whole time.
Alright,
So should we divvy them out?
do we want to do it just by what's on the list, or do we want to do it by precinct? I don't know, I just suggested, I
I
don't
did not
care.
write down the
I was gonna say, I don't know if we know the precincts.
You know the precincts.
Here we go, Ron.
Pretty
You
much.
probably know them.
I just throw an idea that I don't care how we do it.
Or you could each take 4, you
Take
can
4.
just go right down
Yeah,
and
let's
say the
just go right
first,
down the
fourth,
list.
third, and then the last person gets 5.
Okay.
I'll take the first 4.
Okay, which
on
are?
list.
I don't know. I don't know, it doesn't matter.
Okay,
On the yellow list, I'll
Okay.
take the first 4.
so that would be Barnes, Pack, Oxford, and 775 Washington.
Okay.
775 Washington. and
On both of
Cliffs.
them?
Ranger Cliffs.
Right, and
Granger
so it's
Cliffs.
also on your other one,
Right,
so that's
yeah.
a double.
Okay.
So you really might only have 24.
Okay.
Anything to eliminate.
Oh, there you go.
There you go, right. I'll take all those then.
Alright.
So Barnes, Packaging, Oxford, and Washington Street.
I'll take the next 4.
So that's the other Barnes Street,
Cemetery Road,
Oh,
Prospect Street, and 730 Oxford.
south.
Blue Beach.
Mhm.
But that's also in here.
So I will take those 4.
I didn't see it in there. We're just clarifying
So
one.
Oh, there might be another double.
75 Rochdale.
Well, yeah, 295 Lester is a
You are
double.
so good.
Okay.
It's looked at.
No, no.
And Rotary Beach was looked at, we're just trying to get the address. 175 Rochdale.
You should know.
So I think we have one more
street to
duplicate.
another.
Yep.
Okay.
175 Rochdale, because Ron remembered.
and there's actually another duplicate.
Right,
Oh, yeah?
295 Lester.
295 Lester
Lester.
is the 5-acre parcel listed in the other packet.
23.
Alright.
This is good.
Okay.
Okay, so first 4,
Uh,
Second floor?
Second floor,
That's,
sir.
so, yep, Barnes
Okay.
Cemetery, Prospect, and 730 Oxford.
Yep.
I'll take the next four, but can you read them to me, because I actually don't have that
Yep.
sheet.
Lot 1 on Packagug Street,
Okay.
Lot 2 on Bancroft Street,
They're both close.
295 Leicester Street,
Okay.
and Lot 55 on Cemetery Road.
Cemetery, which you think is gonna be the next
You gotta go
anyways?
into us, you gotta go up, Dead Horse Hill.
Should we ignore that one?
I would think so.
I would.
Okay, what's the next one after
Cross
that?
it out. Gone.
Lot 62 on Goddard Drive.
62 on Goddard.
And that's right by Packagug, so
Yep.
it's a beautiful
Look
thing.
at that, and I live near Leicester Street, so made that work. Okay.
Okay, provide me with an assignment. I don't know where we are.
Okay, Lot 15 on
Open
Rockdale
concrete.
Street.
I'm sorry, I'm being distracted.
That's okay.
here.
The
No
next one,
comment.
the next one on the orange sheet was Lot 15 on Rockdale Street.
Did we, that Rotary Beach, okay.
And then Lot 52 on Cemetery Road.
Okay. Did we say we were, okay.
And then 175 Rockdale Street. That's-
Another Rotary Beach.
And that's everything on the
Yeah, they're on
orange.
both sides of Rotary Beach. One was the parking area.
That's everything on the
One is
orange
the
sheet, and
beach
then
side.
then you want to take
It's the same spot.
Camp Gleason?
Sure.
All right.
They're divided by a road, so we have
Thank
to look
you.
at them
Uh-huh.
separately. Yep. I live across the lake.
So I guess a question, right? Is everybody's kind of parsing things out
Yeah.
in pieces, and I'm kind of concerned as when we bring it back as a whole.
How we're
that
gonna
we missed or
evaluate.
something, right?
Yep.
So if we take these two documents and merge them into one,
Yep.
right? And then put it up on a shared drive on Google Drive or something fun like that. And then people go in and maybe, put their names against what it is they're going to see, so we kind of have a, agreed upon, centralized owner of it. Is everyone cool with that?
Absolutely.
Yep.
We just fill in on that as we, is that okay to do? Dated
As long as we don't
to input
discuss
the
it.
data, as
Right,
long as
you're
we're
not
discussing.
discussing it.
Okay,
Just
It
putting
just
the
gives the
Data
ability for
collection.
everybody to look
Right.
at it.
Yeah.
And,
Then we can come back
there's
here.
maybe there's a two-step process to this. One is we create the list, or I'll just create it because I got most of this already in the spreadsheet and I
Right.
have them.
Yep.
I funnel it over to the town so that they can say, okay, this just to make sure that my duplicates are taken out, any of the gotcha parcels, and until you come back and say, okay, that's your list.
right.
I post it to Google Drive, send out an email to the committee that says, it's posted on this location, go in please and add your names to it. And then, and we should do that, I guess, the sooner we do that piece of it, the better, because
Sure.
then that keeps us
Yep.
running in terms of going out to look at parcels.
Yep,
And just a reminder, even though it's in Google Docs, everything's public record.
yes.
So you're using it for your purposes, so it is a public record.
Yep.
So when you bring it to the next committee meeting, it's public.
Great.
You want to take your lots?
I don't care. I mean, I've lost track of who's taking. That's why that was my purpose of asking. Because I don't know everybody's name. Unfortunately,
So I
yeah.
took the first four.
You were much
So
smarter
you
than I was.
and Ron are the last two to divide the last remaining properties.
So I don't really care
Okay.
whatever which ones are. So
You want to do that, Sarah?
Yeah, I think Julia Bancroft hasn't taken yet.
which one are you looking at? Which,
This one?
The white, we're on the white
Yep.
sheet.
yeah. Fine.
Okay. And then Town Hall,
It's fine.
Now, it's Town Hall, Mary D.
it's this 104 Central Street.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's Mary Good's right here.
Just so nobody thinks we're wiping out Town Hall. We'll be getting a lot of calls tomorrow.
There'll be kennels on the first floor.
And then the cornfields at Napas.
Where am I gonna pay my bills?
You can give that to Deacon.
And for Goddard Drive, which is the senior center.
Okay. Got it.
Okay, and then Ron will be the remaining.
What's left?
Lemansky Park
Well, Hellstrom's out, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Alright.
and Boy Street Tot Lot. And then a lot of other things were duplicates or just out.
I would say this, if you really feel like you wanna go out and see the world,
Go ahead.
go
Check
to
'em all
another
out.
site.
Right.
You know?
If we have time. When do we want to have this done by?
Next.
Our next meeting?
Yeah, we have to
Okay.
decide when we're gonna
2
meet
weeks
again.
from
So, right,
2
on
weeks
your
from now.
agenda, Mr. Chairman, the last item on your agenda is to schedule meetings, so just, I did, we looked into it with the clerk's office, and what did we say? Was it the first and the third?
First and
First and the
they're
third
always
Wednesdays are
available.
available, so we tentatively blocked them all from now
Oh,
until
great.
June. So you can choose what you want to do. And just let us know.
Before, you said Mr. Bregman could make tonight, did he happen to mention whether it was this Wednesday or if it was just this Wednesday that he couldn't make?
I think it was just this one,
Okay.
because
I didn't
I
wanna
think we
skip-
threw out a couple dates.
I didn't want to agree to something that he could
Yeah,
never
no,
make.
I think at the last meeting, all of you agreed, including him, that
Yeah.
Wednesdays
Wednesdays
were,
was good.
it's just that particular
Okay,
Wednesday.
yep, works.
All right, my calendar, here we go.
So my suggestion is you might want to schedule, just tentatively schedule your meetings, at least for a couple months. We've got the hold on it anyway,
Yeah,
but
sure.
while you're here.
Are those dates amenable to everyone?
It's at 6. Yeah,
First and third.
Yeah,
Monday.
first
where's
and
it?
third.
at 6 p.m.
Oh, okay, I'm not even looking, okay.
When's the third? This one.
Yeah, those are fine.
So the 1st and the 15th of February
Today is 18.
we're looking at?
So the next one would be
February 1st.
February 1st.
And then February 15th.
Right.
Am I inviting a Fur Friend member for the next meeting, so February 1st?
If they can
Oh,
make it.
If they can make
Yeah.
it, as soon
Okay.
as they can make it.
Okay, great.
And then, Mr. Chairman, would you be posting an agenda, or do you want to get one to me, and we can post it for you? Just want to make
Yes,
sure.
is there, we're hopefully having discussion with a member of the Fur Friends.
Yep.
And we also want to go over these sites that everybody has visited some of, to see whether or not they meet the criteria, or whether they, I suppose they'll fall into 2 groups, those that you can eliminate right away, those that you would keep right away, and then there must be those in between that you're not quite sure of. Really 3 groups.
So do you want to have, number one, your item will be to review your minutes?
Yep.
Review and vote on the minutes, which I'll get to you.
Yeah.
Number 2, discussion with member of Fur Friends.
Yeah.
You want that first?
So they can leave if they choose to.
Right.
Yeah, I would think so.
And it, kind of being respectful of the Fur Friends people's time, can we just have bullets of what we wanted to accomplish with Fur Friends
Yes.
people?
Yeah.
So they know what to prepare besides, you know, the 501c3 barriers?
Right, yep.
Their role.
To me,
trying to
you know,
think of-
alignment of budget expectations, any specific requests or constraints, you know, in terms of that are conditional, you know, for their support.
Clarification of their role in the process. So that we're all on the same page
I mean,
moving forward.
just out of curiosity question, I mean, is a town just, you will take your word for it? I mean, there's no like,
On what?
on the Fur, again.
Their offer of 10%.
Fur Friends
for
is,
example.
you know, I don't know them from Adam, but you know, I'm a business person, so I have to kind of think worst case scenario. So Fur Friends say, you know what, yeah, that sounds good, town, we'll take care of you. And then all of a sudden, the Fur Friends, you know, win the
But they're
lottery
like,
and move
sorry.
on. I mean,
If they win the lottery, then it's gonna all be
you know,
paid.
what's our, you know, I guess, what's the, so getting
Being that
at,
we had
Them in
with
the
the
lottery,
Fur
maybe they'll
Friends, they
donate
made a
that.
commitment
Yes.
to us, and
Right.
there were a couple of selectmen and myself asked.
Truthfully, it's honor
honor
system.
It
But-
is.
yeah, that's what I'm getting
Yeah.
at, it's honor system,
It
and
is.
that's expected, and that's what it is, then I'll move on.
I think it's incredibly generous.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's awesome, yep.
It is.
And like I said in my findings, like any parks that
Park
did
that
not
had
have one,
Right.
it was such a headache. but so many of them work great with the DPW and with, you know, the North, I keep bringing up the North End one, but something that they agreed to do with the city, and I'm not volunteering them to do this, but I just thought it was fantastic. But not only because DPW maintains their park, but they also have stations in non-dog parks. So where there are parks, they have pet cleanup stations, and they maintain those. They refill the poop bags and whatnot. So they're not only taking care of their park, but say Pappas, for example, having one there, because we all know people walk their dogs, and replenishing those bags and stuff. It's just really cool to see them work together, kind of help each other out a little bit.
So I guess if I'm based on what I'm hearing on the Fur Friends portion of the agenda, I would say organization overview, right? I don't need a 35 slide deck, but you know, how do you operate, how do you work, you know, type of thing. Alignment of benefit expectations. You know, just I want to hear them say, okay, I know this could be in this range, and then are there any specific needs or constraints that are associated with your, you know, commitment to, you know, provide this amount of funding? That to me, more or less, is it, or like maybe a timing. You know, is there any heads up? You know, what's your when you need to have a heads up that this is a go in order to be able to raise your amount?
Right.
You need a 2-month window, a 6-month window.
Sure. I think hearing back from them will also help us as we review our sites, because they may bring some stuff up that we didn't even think of. You never know, and it may make our process of elimination even easier as we go through our evals of the sites.
So for agenda purposes, we have review and vote on the draft minutes, discussion with the Fur Friends,
Yeah,
review and discuss site
site visits.
visits. And then I just added schedule next meeting. You can put something in there like any other business.
Yeah.
And then we, like I said, we are trying to, we're here because we want to give you as much help as we can, but we also want to step back and let you do your work and not feel that we're guiding you any direction.
So I would just add maybe a stretch, what I call a stretch goal, meaning if, you know, a lot of, maybe the data comes back, it's so compelling and it tells us a lot of things real quickly, so we're able to move on type of scenario. So I would say, if we, you know, if we're down to a list of 5, what's our next round of criteria to kind of apply to those ones that have survived? Maybe that's our stretch goal for the next time.
You should put that above the review and discuss next meeting.
Right.
Does that mean you may not be at our next meeting?
We weren't, yeah,
Okay.
I mean, as a matter of fact, I probably
No,
have
it's okay.
finance committee.
Yep.
By then, in February, on Wednesday nights, we'll have finance committee.
Okay.
But, you know, like I said, if you want us there, just give us a heads up. If you want information beforehand that we can provide to you, we'll do that. If at some point you get down to the next, you know, your bottom 3 sites and you want to have the town engineer come in,
Sure.
all of that we're willing to do.
Okay,
Thank
great.
Okay, great.
How much information was the town engineer able to provide your committees in terms of costs? Does he have he must have some of those figures, like fencing, he must deal with regulating.
It was rough estimates.
Yeah.
Because without, you know, knowing exactly what company some of the stuff's going to come from, but the town engineer had a good idea of, you know, the general cost of a fence of this height, or the general cost of building a parking lot of a certain size with a certain number of lots and things like that. So we were working off of estimates, and really even for just the first phase of it, it's really just a draft budget going into the design phase. You don't need to know exact costs, but you need the ballpark to make sure you're, for us, within the grant.
He could also, I'm sure, give us cost differences of when we put this out to bid, or when you guys put it out to bid. That's,
Yeah, that will probably come through the grant phase.
yeah,
Because once we get the grant, then you have to go out and get a
Get
company
an
to do the
architect.
design, then you have to put it out to bid, and then, so the timeline is gonna be, it all depends on when you get the grant funds.
Yep.
You're right, because there are different times of year that are better
So
Speaking
I
of
guess what I
which-
heard from that is add a contingency component to your cost analysis. You know, whether it's,
Well, in the design, and the design firm will put that in there, they'll probably put a 10% contingency, just average. Design's usually 10%, contingency is usually 10. Just,
for that 10% of design, what about,
contingency would be 10% of construction, design is 10% of construction.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, something like this, maybe it's more, maybe it's less. Buildings carry a higher contingency than land, but it's a good ballpark.
That just reminded me to also add into the agenda a follow-up with Jim on the Stanton change in funding that they announced on their website.
yeah, I have that.
To put that on the agenda, so we kind of know what that means.
And thank you for doing it.
Yeah.
And also, if anyone needs any copies made for the meeting, let us know, and I'll make sure things that are double-sided get double-sided printing. But if you want to send it beforehand, maybe when the agenda's due, just email it over, and we can make sure you guys have copies of everything
Yeah.
available here.
We'll get you anything, and again, posting, obviously it's up to the chair to come up with the agenda, but
Yeah.
if you want to get it to me, I'm happy to get it over to the clerk, so whatever's easy for you.
That'll be all right for me. I can
And then the
do that.
minutes, again, it's
Yeah.
not every single, a lot of this, you can just say discussion about criteria ensued, you don't have to say how the discussion went, you said this, you said that, it's just discussion ensued, and this was the decision that was made, this is the criteria. The important thing is, what did you finally decide, not how did you get there,
Yeah.
right, on the minutes.
And am I writing them up for next meeting?
At the next one, you would, I'll do these, I took
Thank
all my
you.
notes, yeah, I'll do this, because you didn't know you were gonna be.
It's great.
Good to you.
So I'll take care of that, and then
Oh,
the
you're
next one,
wonderful. Thank you.
glad to help.
Any other business? I move
Well,
to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Oh, all in favor?
Yes.
Oh,
I heard a lot of second, yeah.